D-Mace, Fingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership where the buzz is always about great service. Derek Mason and Adam Vingan here with you. Willie Donick out today. The Predators are taking off early for their road trip. They are headed to Toronto to face the Maple Leafs tomorrow. Now, Derek, I'm not sure if
They should have left yesterday.
I don't know if you've ever been to Toronto,
No.
but the traffic is just it's awful. And if you don't time your flight correctly, you could be stuck in traffic for a couple of hours.
Ooh.
It's bad. So the Predators are doing the smart thing.
Their interstate system is horrible.
Well, I've only been to Toronto so many times.
But each time.
Yeah, and I think in people who are listening who might be more familiar with this, text us 615-737-1025. There are only so many ways into the city.
Oh, okay.
So, and it's a you know, it's got a lot of, you know, it's got a big population. A lot of people live in the suburbs.
The six?
Yes, the six.
Six.
Which is how many hours it could take you to get from downtown Toronto to your house if you leave at the wrong time. So the Predators are trying to get ahead of the traffic by leaving early, but the Predators will be back in action tomorrow night against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Puck drop, I want to say, is at 6:30, pregame at 5:30, right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. And we will get to the Predators today. We did not talk about the Predators yesterday because we were reacting to the Titans' loss to the Commanders, but we will spend some significant time talking about the Predators in the second hour. But Derek, before we start today's show, there's also something we did not get to yesterday. Yes. I gave you a homework assignment.
Yes, you did.
On Wednesday. We did our final show of Thanksgiving week on Wednesday, and I gave you a homework assignment. I tasked you with tuning into your favorite channel, the Hallmark Channel, to watch the premiere of Holiday Touchdown, A Chiefs Love Story. Did you do your homework assignment?
Yes, I did.
I need your quick review of this film.
It was a absolute cheesy. And when I say cheesy,
what a
I
shocker.
mean cheesy.
Cheesier than most?
Yes,
cheesy
cheesier
Hallmark
than
movies?
most. Because you know why it was cheesier than most? Because it was like the Chiefs. Like they used the Chiefs. And they had a few players. No, I mean, they had a few players on the, you know, that were a part of the Chiefs winning. They did have two of those guys on. I forgot they had the tackle and the receiver, I believe. He was in it. And it was just cheesy. It was absolutely 100% cheesy.
I think
it
was good too.
I think Donna Kelsey made an appearance in this movie.
It was good, but it was cheesy.
How many Taylor Swift references were in there?
I think the whole vibe of the film was sort of Taylor Swift.
Oh no, I figured, but I just want to know like how many references.
Okay,
you got to pay for those.
My thing was okay. You have this as every Hallmark Christmas show is this town where people go into and everything's fine, and it's that one person that has this problem, and then all of a sudden the guy shows up, and you like the guy, you don't like the guy, you have a problem with the guy, then all of a sudden at the end you and the guy get together. She was looking for love, and it was the hat was the big thing, like because I think her parents.
They're Kansas City Chiefs super fans,
and there's something magical about the hat, like you know, because their parents got married, I guess, with the hat and the mistletoe, all this other stuff. So
yes,
the guy didn't truly believe in the hat, but she did.
And the love interest, by the way, his name is Derek,
exactly,
spelled the exact same way as Derek Mason. So I'm sure you felt a kinship with this character who looks absolutely nothing like you, but. You're two Derricks.
Yeah.
Derrick.
There was a part in the movie where this showed me how cheesy the movie was.
All right.
You know, he walks into their neighborhood, and you know, in Hallmark movies and neighborhoods, they're always doing something. Like no matter what, there's a house over here that's roasting peanuts. There's a house over here that's doing marshmallows. There's a house over here that's drinking hot chocolate and
they're selling the hot chocolate. The carols are out there
down the street. So he's walking down the street, right? He doesn't know that this is like he's been on this block before, but for some reason he doesn't know that that's her house. So he walked past the house, and they're all sitting out in the front yard. And he looks over, he's like, "Oh, I didn't know y'all lived here." You didn't know we lived here? So he walks up, and then they just have an extra chair just sitting there by itself so he can just walk and sit down. It was the most cheesiest thing, but I loved it. But I truly
That's the
loved
definition
it.
of a Hallmark movie right there.
And it should have been a conflict of interest because she was a super fan. Her family was a super fan, and they had to pick winners, but then they end up liking each other.
Right.
It's
She's
not a conflict.
seducing.
Exactly.
She's seducing the gentleman whose job it is to choose the Kansas City Chiefs superfan.
Absolutely. So
This
that's
is
a conflict.
scandalous.
That's kind of like a,
Scandalous.
yeah.
That is conflict.
Oh
but
man.
but as
They found a plot hole.
So
yeah.
do you recommend it to people who love Hallmark
okay,
movies?
if you love Hallmark movies, I 100% recommend it. 100%. If you love cheesy above cheesy with extra cheese, then watch
That's
it.
a lot of cheese.
It's a 3-cheese platter.
It's,
Yeah.
Oh man.
If you
well,
if you like it, then watch it.
well, I appreciate you
Yes.
doing your homework assignment, and I hope somebody else listening has watched this movie as well. Maybe I will even partake.
Yeah, watch it.
My cheesy Christmas movie, the one that I watched as a kid that I still enjoy watching to this day, is Jingle All the Way with
Oh, that's a
Arnold
good one.
Schwarzenegger
Yes.
and Sinbad. Oh man, Rita Wilson's in that movie. Well, it's turbo time. It's turbo time as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned all the time.
Turtle time. Turtle time.
Yes.
Okay,
oh,
another
man.
one I saw this weekend that I hadn't seen in years. I totally forgot. National Lampoon's Christmas.
Of course.
Oh,
It
yeah.
is so funny.
So good.
Oh, it's so funny. When he tried to turn on the lights, the lights wouldn't come on. After he had been on the top of the house for all that time, and then come to find out the light switch in the garage was the light switch to turn on everything, not the light switch that he was trying to plug up. And they figured it out. So
Derek highly recommends this Kansas City
Yes.
Chiefs themed
Yes.
Hallmark
If you are a
movie.
Hallmark fan.
If
If
you
you
are
are
a
a
Hallmark
Hallmark
fan,
fan, yes.
or if you just like cringeworthy television,
Yeah.
but that's what Hallmark is all
I'll
about.
probably watch it then.
Yep.
There you
Tis the season. It's also the season, Derek, for
Mhm.
talking about coaches on the hot seat, which might be a theme of today's show, by the way. But I was interested.
Teaser.
I was interested in something that Bill Barnwell wrote at ESPN.com. He wrote a story that came out yesterday. What Week 13 losses mean for NFL head coaches on the hot seat. And there were some names on there that we expected. Doug Peterson with the
Mhm.
Jaguars, Brian Daboll with the Giants,
Mhm.
Zach Taylor with the Bengals, Antonio Pierce with the Raiders. But he also had a section, Bill Barnwell did, on Brian Callahan. And a lot of the section on Brian Callahan focuses on one thing in particular, the special teams
Mhm.
play. And Bill Barnwell had a list of the greatest hits of the Titans special teams this season. Like
It's a doozy.
we've watched a lot of bad football this season and in previous seasons as well. But you might have forgotten of how bad special teams has been for the Titans this season. And here's a sampling to refresh your memory. In week 1, the Titans had a punt blocked for a touchdown, and they allowed a 67-yard kickoff return, and they lost to the Bears. The following week, the Jets managed to block a punt with 4 rushers against 7 blockers, setting up a short field and a field goal for the Jets and another loss for the Titans. In week 3, Jeffrey Simmons was flagged for holding on a 4th and 4 field goal attempt that went wide right, handing the Packers a first down. Green Bay scored a touchdown 2 plays later. Shocker, Titans lose. Lions in week 8, a 72-yard kickoff return, a 64-yard punt return, and a 90-yard punt return for a touchdown. They also fumbled on a return. This graded out as the second worst performance by any special teams unit in a single game since 1979. And of course, against the Texans, the Titans allowed an 80-yard kickoff return on the opening play, committed an illegal blindside block on the punt return, and muffed a fourth quarter punt to give the ball back to Houston. So we know that the special teams has been terrible this season for the Tennessee Titans. And it falls on Brian Callahan and more specifically his special teams coach, Colt Anderson. But there was something that Barnwell wrote that I want to get into with you, Derek. So this was Barnwell's
Mhm.
reasoning. Quote, "It's no fun to see coaches fired, but it's hard for a team to be as bad on special teams as this one this season." We all would agree with that.
Mhm.
Bringing Anderson back in 2025 would be and this is Barnwell, credibility killing move for Callahan. A credibility killing move for Brian Callahan. And what's interesting about this, Derek, is we know that Brian Callahan has a relationship with Colt Anderson.
Mhm.
Colt Anderson is in his first season with the Titans as a special teams coordinator. This is his first time as a special teams coordinator. He spent 4 seasons as an assistant special teams coach with the Bengals alongside Brian Callahan in Cincinnati before coming here. So we know that they're tight. They are close. And look, we all know sometimes in this business, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Mhm.
And I feel like we used to rag on Mike Vrabel a lot for hiring his friends. But in life, you tend to look toward people that you know and have relationships with. So we have seen that Colt Anderson is probably out of his depth as a special teams coach. We just laid out some of the issues that they've had. By the way, Jaquan Jackson is the leading vote getter for return specialist for the AFC for the Pro Bowl. And I know that the Pro Bowl isn't what it used to be, and it's a fan vote, but it's still funny to see that the only Titans representative so far is Jaquan Jackson, who's fumbled 5 balls in 6 weeks. He's lost 2 of them, but he's fumbled 5 balls in 6 weeks. So let's start there. So according to Bill Barnwell, Derek, keeping Colt Anderson past this season would be a credibility killing move for Brian Callahan. I heard Robbie Stanley talk about this earlier this week about how it's time for Brian Callahan to show that he has certain standards with how he wants to run his team. Special teams has been an issue, and we know that Colt Anderson is a friend of his. But sometimes in this business, you have to make hard decisions. So as a first-time head coach, with someone who's also getting a first opportunity as a special teams coach, how does Brian Callahan go about managing all of this? And do you agree with the idea that it would kill his credibility as a coach, which is very important, if he doesn't make a change?
Well, if that's the case, fire Denard Wilson too. Seriously. I am not kidding about this. I'm not advocating for his firing, but if that logic wants to be used with the special teams coach, and you have every right to say that, and I will sort of, we'll go over the list of things that, that the special teams contributed to, but not in a good way. I love Jameis Winston, by the way. I just needed to say that because he was on television. But look at the defense. The defense has done just as much damage or even more than than the special teams. Is anyone's calling for Denard Wilson to be fired? Nah. Would keeping Denard Wilson be a credibility killer? Nah, probably not. I think we have to look at, and I am guilty of this sometimes, I believe. Not more than likely, not knowingly, but I'm guilty of it. I'm not gonna exclude myself from this. That when things are happening, when things are bad, we go to the low-hanging fruit. And we automatically get rid of this person or get rid of that guy or bench this guy and put somebody else in there and think that's going to cure everything. Now, there are some situations where you have to do that. And if it doesn't get better, you still have to do it just to have change, just to see if, going to the second option is a better option. So sometimes you have to do it. But I'm looking at just this coaching staff as a whole. Fire Bill Callahan, if this is the case. Because again, if we're going by the premise of things that the special teams has contributed to, but not in a good way in games, because everybody has a hand in winning and losing. It's a third for everybody, 33, 33, 33 across the board, or 33, 33, 34. You give the offense a little bit more. I don't know. But everybody has a hand in losing and everybody has a hand in winning. The Titans haven't done much winning around here. Okay. So if you want to have this, if you want to say that, fire the special teams coach, because if you keep him, it's a credibility killer. Well, let's keep going down the line. The defensive coordinator ain't doing too hot either. I know statistically one of the best defenses in the National Football League, but if you watch them, you know that's not the case. The offense, they ain't been doing a damn thing. So fire yourself, okay? Fire yourself from being an offensive coordinator, okay? Look at other areas of the team. The offensive line, they're not doing well. Fire Bill Callahan as well. And while you're at it, because We want to have this notion of, okay, if it's not going right, let's just fire that guy and automatically things will get better. You fired Ackerman and the whole coaching staff. Has the special teams unit got better? No, it hasn't. Why? Because the team is not better. Special teams and people listen to me, and those that know the game, special teams is a reflection of your whole team. Special teams, I've said this before, like, if you show me a good team and I'll show you a good special teams. There's not too many times where you have a really good team and a horrible special teams. Those two things don't go hand in hand. Now, your kicker may be a little bit off, but when you talk about your return team, your punt coverage team, your kickoff coverage team, they're usually middle of the pack or above that. Typically, when you have a good special or you have a good team, you have a good special teams. Why? Because the whole roster is good. So those guys, so it sort of trickles down into your special teams. I look at it from this standpoint. I'm not absolving, Cole Anderson. I was about to say Ackerman. Cole Anderson.
They do have the same initials.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe the Titans should. I think a texter.
Maybe they need to go away from that.
I think a texter on Robbie and Rex Road said maybe the Titans should stop hiring special teams coaches that have CA as their initials. Maybe that's the first thing to do.
That could be the first thing. But when you look at it, it's like, that's why I don't advise or I don't recommend firing a guy right now, especially a special teams coach. Because if you look at the roster, this roster isn't good. They don't have many good players on here. So when you know a roster is not good, do you expect their special teams to be good? That's like saying, like, the cake ain't good, but you still gonna, I'm gonna go sell it to everybody. No, this cake is not good. So why are you selling it to people? Don't do that. This team is not good. So why do you expect their special teams to be good? This team from top to bottom isn't good, and their special teams is a reflection of that. So if you want to start firing someone in the middle of the season or with 6 games left, fire everybody. Fire the defensive coordinator. Fire yourself from being an offensive coordinator. Fire your dad. Only person that should keep their job is the running backs coach. And maybe the wide receivers coach, because they have been able to do something, and the quarterbacks coach is kind of up and down. 1 week you fire, 1 week you don't. It don't matter to me. But if you're taking that same logic, fire everybody. It's hard to fire a guy in the middle of the season, especially when you're a brand new head coach, because you want to evaluate the whole thing. Allow the season to play out. Go back, evaluate, why are you having these problems? Is it the special teams coach, or is it the players? Again, I can teach you how to catch a punt. I can tell you a million times to secure it, but then if you go out there and don't secure it, that's not my fault. Now, what you can put on him and say is, well, you kept Jackson back there a little bit too long. Okay, I get that, but that has to run up the pole. You see what I'm saying? You can't just say, I'm benching you, Adam. Hey, I'm the special teams coach. You sitting on the bench. No, I got to run that through the head coach before I start making decisions like that. And maybe the head coach said, no, we're not doing we don't have nobody else. Keep him back there, and hopefully he doesn't fumble the ball. So he goes back out there a game or 2 later, 3 games later, and he fumbles the ball. So it's like, okay, now what do we do? Do we continue to go with this guy, or do we put somebody else in there? So if you want to fire him because, or if the fans want to, put him on pitch, have pitchforks and torches, then you gotta also understand that if you want to fire him, then you might as well fire everybody else. Because my thing is this: allow the season to finish out, so now you can reevaluate things. Again, the punt dropping, the fumbles isn't their fault. I task everybody to go back that is complaining about Cole Anderson, and I did this. Everybody go. It could, because people are commenting as if they know the ins and outs of a special teams. Go and watch every special teams coverage, just the coverage. Don't even watch the returns. Go watch punt coverage and kickoff coverage, and tell me what you see. Tell me what this goes for every show on our net on 102.5. Go back and watch special teams and tell me, what do you see? If you just say, oh, he fumbled the ball, or he's not, you don't know anything about special teams. You don't know lane placement, where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be there, where the ball is kicked, and how you're supposed to cover. You don't know all those things. And until you know all those things, then you can come back and say, okay, yeah, they were out of this team is bad because that guy ran down his lane or he didn't do what he was supposed to do. Colt Anderson, I am not saying Colt Anderson doesn't need to be better, because he does. But not only does Colt Anderson needs to be better, the players need to be better. We talk so many times about this game is about the Jimmies and Joes. Well, why not this one? Why this one ain't about the Jimmies and the Joes? Because essentially, if I've been on good special teams, that's why I can talk about this. It is about the Jimmies and the Joes. Even though Alan Lowry, he was a great special teams coach, a great one. And if it was up to me, I'd be asking him questions about special teams if I'm that organization. But even Alan Lowry, he can coach it up. But if we're not doing what we're supposed to do, then what else is he supposed to do? He's drawing it up exactly how it's supposed to be. Just like the Music City Miracle. He drew it up how he envisioned it was supposed to go based upon coverage. If we don't execute it right, that's not Alan Lowry's fault. That's our fault. We had great special teams. It was one reason and one reason only. It wasn't about me. They could have put any guy back there. Well, no, I'm not going to say that. But it necessarily wasn't about me. It was about the 10 guys in front of me. Lorenzo Neal, every time we got back there, get on my hip and don't dip, brother. Let's roll. It was a mentality. That mentality has to start with the players. The coach can tell you all he wants. Alan Lowry could scream all he wants to. Do this, do that. No, but it was, we took it as like ownership. We had ownership of special teams. Myself, Lorenzo Neal, Dennis Stallings, Terry Killens, whoever else, Favors, all those guys that was on that special teams unit, we took pride in it. Regardless of what the coach was doing, we took pride in special teams. Why? Because we knew more than likely that was going to be the only way we were going to affect the game in a positive way. Until these guys start taking pride and ownership of that unit, it's going to continue to be this way. It was that way under Ackerman, and it's now the same way under Colt Anderson.
Alex is on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Alex, thank you for waiting. Please go ahead.
Hey, D-Mace.
Yes.
Thanks for taking my call. I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
I think the problem with this, I don't think Callahan should be fired after the season yet, but like there is a problem. My problem is there seems to be he doesn't hold the players accountable. There seems to be some, tell me if I'm wrong, D-Mace, but there seems to be some like leadership missing. And I blame it particularly on Jeffrey Simmons, because from the outside looking in, he doesn't seem to respect the coaches, and it seems like a lot of the players are following his lead, and it's backfired particularly. I want to hear your opinion on that. Thanks for taking my call, D-Mace.
Thank you. Appreciate it. We'll get to his
well, we do have Tim Hasselbeck coming up next. So do you have a quick answer?
Yeah, quick answer is
and we can get back to it with Tim.
I don't have a quick answer. I have more of an elaborate answer. So I would rather get to it on the other side, and I'm sure
we can talk about it with Tim.
Yeah,
we'll talk about it with Tim Hasselbeck. ESPN NFL analyst Tim Hasselbeck will join us coming up next. We'll ask him that question and more about the Tennessee Titans in the NFL and the NFL. But tomorrow, it's your chance to participate in Preds Pick to Click. If you correctly guess a Preds player that scores a goal in the Preds game tomorrow night, you win a pair of tickets to an upcoming Preds home game. Participate with Robbie and Rexroad tomorrow morning at 8:45.
It's never too late to start thinking about the big game. And this November's in sports, the new sportsbook. Tennessee has launched a brand new sweepstakes for all its Tennessee customers. The Big Game Sweepstakes, where you could win a grand prize of 2 tickets to Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans, or $10,000 cash. And what's more is Zen Sports will also award 50 additional prizes, which include 2 tickets to any Tennessee sporting event or $100 cash. Want in on the action? You can earn multiple entries every day just by betting on the Zen Sports app. For every bet you place, you will earn 1 entry, and for every dollar you bet, an additional entry like parlays will like parlays. Earn the double entries on every parlay play. So what are you waiting for? When you sign up for Zen Sports, you'll automatically earn up to $100. No danger first wager. If your first bet loses, you'll be reimbursed for the amount of your bet up to $100. So start betting with Zen Sports and download their app today. That's Zen Sports, where betting just got better. And remember, gambling problems, call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 years or older to bet here in Tennessee.
D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063, The Game. Derek Mason and Adam Vingan here with you, joined on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, by ESPN's NFL analyst, Tim Hasselbeck. Tim, we were just talking about a column that Bill Barnwell wrote on ESPN.com. He was looking at coaches that he thinks could be on the hot seat. He includes Brian Callahan in that. We can quibble with that if we want, but he was talking about the special teams play, and Bill Barnwell broke down all of the issues the special teams have had over the course of the season. But there was one thing that he wrote that we have been talking about so far on this show. Barnwell wrote, quote, bringing Colt Anderson, the special teams coach, back in 2025 would be a credibility killing move for Brian Callahan. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of good coaches in the league, coaching special teams, coaching positions, coaching on either side of the ball. Like, I don't know that there's really ever a situation where, you know, it's a credibility killing move to bring somebody back who has experience. And I get it. Like, there have been blocked punts, and there are obviously some issues and stuff like that. And I'm sure that's why Bill is saying what he's saying and writing what he's writing. But I think, and I haven't been in the meetings, but I would venture to say that, every mistake that's been made on the special teams, some of the things have probably been addressed and corrected before they ever even happened. And so the blame on it, ultimately, I get it, will fall back on the coaches. But I also think that, there are times where the guys are professionals, like they need to kind of do their job. And so that's why I never think I don't think that there's a credibility killing move, by retaining a coach. Like Andy Reid got fired once upon a time by Philadelphia. Like, I think sometimes it means it's time to move on. But that seems like a pretty harsh assessment.
Either way, Tim, I mean, it's going to be a tough decision, you would think, for Brian Callahan, because he's a first-time head coach. He's navigating this for the first time as well. Anderson is someone he goes back with to Cincinnati. Anderson is getting his first shot as a special teams coach in the NFL because of his relationship with Brian Callahan. And he put in the work. I'm not just saying that he just got it because he's friends with Brian Callahan. He put in the work. But it is a tough position for a first-time head coach who's also giving someone he's close to his first crack at being a coach in the NFL, a special teams coach. I just imagine that's a very fine line that Callahan has to walk as he determines what to do next as the season progresses.
Yeah, no, I mean, and listen, that's fair. Yeah, like across the board, I can remember, like when Mike Vrabel was hired to coach outside linebackers, I think in Houston, people like, I don't know. I mean, he's ready for that? Can he do that? Like, there was that talk. Like, there was talk when Mark Brunell, was hired as the quarterbacks coach in Detroit, and it wasn't going great for Jared Goff right away. And people are like, I mean, he was, at some little high school down in Jacksonville. Like, are we sure, like, he can do that? Like, I don't know. And listen, Dan Campbell hired Mark Brunell for a lot of reasons, but one of the big reasons was, look, they were teammates in New Orleans together, right? So, like, I think it's the case with all of these coaches. I think it's the case, in terms of, hey, do you feel like this person is qualified and capable of doing their job? And, when you fall short in any way, trying to identify the reason for it. Like, did you have the wrong guys on the punt team? Did you have the wrong scheme? Was it not coached well enough? So I think that's always the case. But like, I just say, like, the type of player that Colt Anderson was as a special teamer, the reputation that he had in pretty, quick time as a special teams coach, I don't think it's one of those things where, like, oh my gosh, he's retained as the special teams coordinator and everyone's saying, like, oh, he doesn't deserve to have that job. Like, I don't think it's a fair assessment of Colt, what he's capable of, or any of that stuff.
Will Levis was not front of mind for most people in the Titans game on Sunday against the Commanders. They had bigger issues. I mean, Levis played another solid game, 2 touchdowns, no turnovers, was playing from behind immediately. So there does come some struggles with that. But we were having this conversation yesterday, and a texter on our show coined Will Levis the beer goggles quarterback. And the reason why he did that was, we look at the past 4 weeks, and we've asked you about this each of the past few weeks. We've looked at the past 4 weeks, and Will Levis has stacked some solid games. Now, as you pointed out last week, he did have the pick 6 against the Texans that put them in a bad spot. They were able to overcome it. But overall, his performance since returning from injury has been better than his performance before he was injured. And I guess my question is, are we wrong when we're evaluating Will Levis as a whole? When we look at how he's played over the past 4 weeks versus the beginning of the season, are we maybe making more of the progress that Will Levis has made over the past 4 weeks because of just how bad he was to start the season?
Probably, because I think that we got to think about like what the expectations were coming into the year, right? Like the expectations coming into the year, like most teams in every city is, okay, like, are we going to play well enough to, go to the playoffs? Like, are we going to play well enough to, feel like we have a quarterback that we want to build around? So, I think that was the feeling in the beginning part of the season. And then obviously when it didn't go well, the initial reaction was definitely like, hey, like this won't work. It's not going to happen this way. And so with that, you then say, okay, like how do you reevaluate him? I think last week we talked about, like, let's say he continues to play on this trajectory through the rest of the season. Does he enter into the year next year as the presumed starter? Like, I don't think he does. So I think that's a drastic difference from, hey, he's going to be the starting quarterback and everyone's going to feel, good about building around him, for the future.
We're talking with Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst and head coach of the Ensworth Tigers. Tim, not only did the Tennessee Titans, get beat down this weekend, it wasn't good. There were a few things after the game that was said that, seemed to ruffle a little feathers, at least with the fans, let's say that. Jeffrey Simmons, insinuating that, possible hangover from, beating the Houston Texans. And then Brownlee Jr. comes out and alludes to the weather, it being cold. As a head coach, when you hear things like that, what are you thinking? Because Brian Callahan, I guess, caught wind of it yesterday when they asked him the question. And his response was, I thought the guys, as far as the week of practice, he said, I thought the guys had a really good week of practice. I didn't sense any hangover from the guys. But then obviously you get in the game, and from the jump, I text the guys. I said, it looks like they're still in the locker room. It doesn't look like they're out there on a field playing. And I've been a part of teams that it's looked that way, regardless of if we've lost a prior week or won a prior week. So as a head coach, when you hear one of your players say that, what are you thinking?
Yeah, here's what I would say. Like, I think there's human nature in all these games. So, like, I think we saw it, like, in some of the divisional matchups a week ago, whether, it's, a Thursday night game and you're like, wait a second, why does Pittsburgh look like that on Thursday night when they look so good, other times? Or, Washington, for that matter, like they've been so good and then they play Dallas and you're like, really? Like, that's what you're going to look like? So there's always going to be human nature. There's always they're all pros. So the difference between the really good teams and the 2-win terrible teams, like, while it can seem huge at times, like it's not like college football where the difference is gigantic. So, like, there's that element. So there's human nature. You're really not as far apart as everyone thinks. And then I think that there's, general situations for each team, right? So, like, who's a desperate team? The Commanders. Mm-hmm. Like, they've been on a skid. They're heading into a bye week. Like, their season is getting away from them, after so much promise. Like, I'm sure that they were locked in. So all that to say, like, you and I both know, D-Mace, like, it kind of happens in a locker room, right? Like, Victory Monday, some stuff kind of gets, swept under the rug a little bit. But here's the thing I would say. That is happening everywhere. You just can't be a team that is ever talking about it publicly. Like, that to me is the mistake. Like, that's who the Dallas Cowboys are. The Dallas Cowboys are the team that, like, you have a player go, yeah, we just weren't up for the game. Like, what? Like, why would you say something like that publicly? Because now all you did was just create a fire that your organization now has to put out, whether it's the head coach or whether it's a leader on your team. So, like, to me, that's the mistake. Like, whatever the mindset of the team was, however they were dealing with the temperature, whatever it is, like, those just aren't things. It's careless, it's sloppy, and it creates a problem that your team doesn't need. Like, that to me is kind of just an immaturity by the players to even say stuff like that publicly.
Now, Tim, how close are the margins between, and you just talked about it, as far as a lot of these teams are closer to one another than not, because that's the way the league wants it. They want parity across the board. But when you see an offense like Detroit, or even, you look at an offense like Tampa with Jameis Winston last night, or what Bo Nix is able to do now with Denver, and you see how it runs, and it seems like a well-oiled machine. It seems like they're running. I know Jameis throws his interceptions, but it seems like the offense, when they need to get it going, they can get it going. Why do you think it's so hard for others and it looks so easy for teams like Kansas City? And I know the quarterback, I get it, but some teams it just looks easier. Even when you don't have a Patrick Mahomes, it looks easier for some teams, whereas other teams it looks a lot harder.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's some teams where it's like, man, it just feels like you feel like you're playing against 14 people, or you're playing like on a slanted uphill field. Like there's no question there's some of that. The quarterback is a big part of it. Your plan going into each and every week is certainly a part of it. And then, do you have guys that are stepping up? Like, I mean, that's the differentiator. Like, here's the crazy thing about it. Like, you just take a team like the Kansas City Chiefs, okay? The Kansas City Chiefs are 11-1. So their point differential is plus 54 on the season. Okay? Like, for an 11-1 team. So somebody told me that there was a stat out there that was like, if you took away like the final 2 minutes of every game this season, that the Kansas City Chiefs are like a 2-win team or something. There's some crazy stat like that. And so, like, I actually do think it's relatively close. You hear the thing of like, oh, it's a game of inches. Like, it's the little details. And, the thing about like the little details is you never know like which guy has got to be focused on the little details on the most important play of the game. Cause like, you just don't know when it's going to happen. And like that to me is like the difference between like the 11-1 team and then the team that you're like, well, why are you 6-7 or why are you 3-9? Like, well, you are because, it's maybe a young player who has an MA, at the wrong time, or a special teams blunder, or, a guy misses a kick, or like those are the things that just end up crushing you as a football team. And look at the Bengals. Like, the Bengals aren't an awful team, but like their record indicates that they are. And it's because, like it's been little things each and every week.
Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst, joining us on DVD as he does every Tuesday. Tim, great stuff as always. We'll talk next week.
Sounds good. See you guys.
Yep.
Tim Hasselbeck joining us on the program. 615-737-1025. We'll continue this conversation next. Before we do that, this week's Nashville's best deal is from Tito's. Best atmosphere. It brings the sea. Enjoy mouth-watering tacos, sizzling fajitas, and delicious enchiladas, all served with a side of authentic Mexican flair. Get half off a $25 gift card now while supplies last at thegamenashville.com/deals. D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Derek Mason and Adam Vingan here with you. Willie Donick out today. He's on his way to Toronto with the Nashville Predators, who start a road trip tomorrow against the Maple Leafs. He'll be back as part of the show at some point tomorrow. But today it's just Derek and I, and joining us on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, Adam from Portland. Adam, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
What's up, Adam, man? Hey, I kind of disagree. I heard you say Brian Callahan has a difficult decision to make with Colt Anderson. I think it's a very easy decision, Adam. And I hear D-Mace, and I totally agree with him that the reflection of your team when your special team sucks. But this right here, I've never seen anything like it. I wonder if you guys have. Like, I've never seen special teams miss it this bad. 2 block punts. Just go back through the resume of this guy's first season. Nobody would survive that. Like, and if it's a problem because he's his buddy, then the first conversation you have with him is, hey, don't make me fire you because I'll fire you. Like, I'm not going to get fired because I won't fire you. Like, this is not going to be a Terry Robisky or whatever. Yeah, I'm not going to do that again. So, no, man, like this guy, not only the punt, like the returns, every game we give up a big return. Every time, like we get no traction. Jackson fumbles a million times. Like it just sucks. I don't think Stonehouse stopped learning how to punt. So I think there's a lot more to it than that, dude. But he would be the first person I would fire. I don't necessarily agree with in-season firings, but what I would like, and I'll be curious to hear what you guys have to say about this too, is for Brian Callahan to make a decision, like to prove that he is a head coach and is going to step in and make a big decision. That's what I would like to see.
Thanks for the call, Adam. And I think that's where I was going with Derek when Adam said that I said, which I did, that it would be a difficult decision for Brian Callahan from a personal standpoint. He is a first-time head coach. He is giving someone he worked with his first opportunity to be a full-time coach, a full-time, like a special teams coach, the head of a unit. Because he's been an assistant coach in the NFL, but his first time being, the boss of special teams, so to speak. And he just brought him in, and the team is struggling. And I heard what you were saying, Derek, about, Denard Wilson. The defense, we talked about this many times. We've talked about this many times during the season. The defense was the number 1 rated defense in the NFL. But in terms of scoring defense, it wasn't. It was good in terms of yards against. And we've talked about all of the reasons for that. But the defense has shown in spurts that it can be a good unit. We listed all of the things that has gone. It's only a small portion, really, of all of the things that have gone wrong with special teams. They are the most glaring mistakes. I think that's the difference, is that even for people like me, more. You will forget more about football than I will ever know. That I know that. But even for someone like me who enjoys the game of football and has been watching it for a long time, the mistakes that the special teams units are making are evident to everybody, even if you aren't a connoisseur of the game, a student of the game. You can see the fumbles, the kickoff returns, the punt returns, all of those things and say, clearly something is going wrong. But my point with it being a difficult decision for Brian Callahan is he's a first-time head coach. He's giving his friend, someone he worked with, his first opportunity as the coach of a unit, and it's not gone well. And it's going to be an interesting decision what he decides to do. And I think we're gonna learn a lot about Brian Callahan based on what he decides to do with his special teams. It doesn't have to happen in season; it could happen after the season. Yeah, but it's going to be interesting to see what he decides to do.
I would have hated to work for any one of y'all. And y'all will probably hate to work for yourselves too, because if you're saying, if you're going to just, and listen, I know some situations are called for where, after the first year, it's just like, man, gosh, we got to do something. We just got to part ways. We just need to do something. I know there are situations like that where it gets really bad. And you just have to make a change for the sake of making a change. And it's not necessarily that you're making a change because you think the change is what needs to be made. It's just you got to make it because there's nothing else really you can do. You can't change the players or you can't change this. And you thinking the one thing I can change is this. So I might as well change it. So I would just, and I understand what you're saying too. Like, the problems are glaring. I get that part. Like the fumbles, everybody sees it. The blocked field goal, everybody sees
The
it.
blocked
The
punts,
blocked
everybody
punts,
sees it.
everybody. Well, not necessarily the blocked field goals, because the kicker, the place kicker, has been awesome this season. But the missed kick punts, where he's out kicking the coverage and they're able to get long returns. Those things are glaring. But don't y'all just think for a second and listen. What I say, for some of y'all, it's not going to change your mind either way. So I'm just saying it just to give you a little bit of context here. I can go into my meeting room, because Tim even said it. Some of this stuff, Coach Anderson coached before it even happened. And some of the stuff you have to coach after it happened, because you felt that I thought you got it when I coached it. Obviously, you didn't get it. So now I got to recoach it and really get you to hone in on what I'm trying to teach you. And you have to be able to sort of take it in and be able to go out on the field and execute it the way you saw it being executed on film or on the chalkboard or the whiteboard, whatever you want to call it. I say chalkboard, old school. So you got to understand that part. Like, I don't think people truly know like how this thing works. Like, I can tell you what to do, I can show you what to do, and I can give you examples on what to do. And you may do it 99 out of 100 times, but that one time may cost us. Does that mean that I am a bad coach? No, it means that you did something opposite of what I have been teaching you. Or if I tell you to do it 100 times and you do it 95 times, is that on the coach? No, because I'm telling you what to do. Now, again, you can say, well, listen, change the player. And you're absolutely right. But they changed the players, and those things still continue to happen. That's not because of that's not because of the special teams coach. It's because the guy that I put in couldn't get the job done. He didn't get it done no better than the guy that I had in before him. So ultimately, what has to happen is we have to have a better roster in order for these things that I'm asking you to execute to be executed. I can tell you what to do. I can lead you there, but I can't force you to do it. That's all I'm saying to people. Like, you can put some blame on Anderson. I get that. But also, you got to put the blame on the players. The players, they haven't done the job that they needed to do, and they can't fire the players. I wouldn't advise them to fire the special teams coach in the middle of the season either. I would advise them to wait till after the season, evaluate everything, as coach will do, and then make your decision. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to Adam. Don't listen to Rexroad. Don't listen to Joe. Chase.
Especially don't listen to Rexroad.
Don't
You're
listen
not
to
gonna-
that man.
Don't
You're not
listen
going to
to
listen to
Jared.
anybody. Don't listen to Joe.
The fans. Don't listen to any of them. Go back at the end of the season and evaluate why these problems were happening. And if it was because of because of the special teams coach, then you change them. But if you see it's not the special teams coach, it's the players. Well, now we got an opportunity to change the players in the offseason. So let's do that.
I feel like, Derek, you're setting me up for the conversation we're about to have, because you're setting me up for the conversation about to have, because we are going to have a difficult conversation, and we will do that next. Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership where the buzz is always about great service. Derek Mason and Adam Vingan here with you. Willie Donick out today. The Predators are en route to Toronto to start their road trip tomorrow against the Toronto Maple Leafs, of course. But Derek, it's time for us to have a difficult conversation.
Are you leaving us?
I am not. I just got here.
You just got here. Are you leaving us?
I would like to stay if you'll have me. I just got here. I'm not leaving. But I think, all right. I am going to make the case to all of you why the Nashville Predators need to make a coaching change. I am at the point where I feel that if I were in charge of the Nashville Predators, I would be moving on from Andrew Brunette. And we've talked a lot about whether or not he should be on the hot seat. We've talked about the issues with the team. They're 25 games into the season. They've won 7 games. There's a lot going on with this team, a lot going wrong. And I just want to start this conversation by sharing some facts. This is completely fact-based. And Derek, I am tasking you with at any point you need to rein me in, or you want to play devil's advocate, I want you to do that. So we are just going to start with some facts about these Nashville Predators through 25 games. We'll start simple, and maybe we'll get a little granular as we go along. The Predators have won 7 games. They've played 25. They've won 7. That is the fewest wins in the National Hockey League. Those 7 wins are also the second fewest through 25 games in franchise history. The 2002-2003 Predators won 5 of their first 25 games. And I would like to remind everybody that the leading scorer for the 2002-2003 Predators was David Legwand with a whopping 48 points. Not a talented group in 2002-2003. The Predators are 30th in the league in points percentage. The only teams worse in points percentage than the Nashville Predators this season are the Montreal Canadiens and the Chicago Blackhawks, 2 teams that were expected to be at the bottom of the standings. You were not expected to be at the bottom of the standings. The Predators are the 32nd ranked team, which means they're last in the NHL in goals per game. They average 2.32 goals per game. At 5-on-5 in 25 games, they've scored 29 goals at 5-on-5. Most of the game is played at 5-on-5. That is an average of 1.16 goals per game at 5-on-5. They have scored 2 or fewer goals in 16 of their 25 games this season. They've lost all 16 games. They're 0-10-6 in the games that they score 2 or fewer goals. The Predators, I remember seeing this, Derek. I was surprised when I saw it in the offseason. The Predators were the first team in NHL history to acquire 2 40-goal scorers in the single offseason. Now, these, and by what the NHL means by this, is 2 players who scored 40 goals the previous season, not players who have 40-goal seasons on their resume. So the Predators were the first team in NHL history to acquire 2 40-goal scorers in a single offseason. Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault are on pace for a combined 36 goals this season. Steven Stamkos has 7 goals in 25 games. That's an average of 0.28 per game. That would be the worst of his NHL career. He will be a Hall of Famer when his career is over. Jonathan Marchessault and Steven Stamkos, through 25 games, have combined to score 5 points at 5-on-5. 2 goals, 3 assists. Steven Stamkos has 1 goal and 2 assists at 5-on-5. Jonathan Marchessault has 1 goal and 1 assist at 5-on-5. And if I'm not mistaken, both of those came in the same game against the Winnipeg Jets, which means in 24 of 25 games, Jonathan Marchessault has 0 points at 5-on-5. All of this is to say that this season has been, by far, the most disappointing season of any team in the National Hockey League. Barry Trotz spent $108.5 million in free agency to bring in 3 of the top 5, you could say, free agents on the board. Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, and Brady Shea. And Brady Shea, he struggled too. I didn't even mention him in this. The Predators spent that money because they expected to win. They expected to be in the running for the Stanley Cup. The Predators are probably just as close to having the number 1 having the best odds to have the number 1 pick in the draft lottery than they are to make the playoffs. That's how bad it's been so far this season. And I want to play something that you and I talked about. This is from November 7th. This is the morning of November 7th. The previous night, the Predators lost to the Capitals on the road. The morning of November 7th, the Predators were preparing to play the Florida Panthers. Willie was out. He was preparing for the game with his FanDuel Sports Network crew. So it was just you and me. And I want to play part of the conversation we had, David, if you will.
He probably, like the players in the locker room, are like, listen, it's not working and we need to get it fixed. And if it doesn't get fixed quickly, then I'm going to have to make some changes. So I think right now is a time to, if you don't want to say panic, say be concerned. It's a time to be concerned. Now, what's your concern level? Some people may think, give them more time. Some people are on the other side, like, man, they need to do something. They need to do something quickly. But how long do you wait if you are on a GM? How many more games are you going to give your team to try to figure this out?
If I were in Barry Trotz's position, I would give them until the end of this road trip. They play at Seattle on November 20th. So that's less than 2 weeks from now. That's about as much time as I give them to figure this out. I give them, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games over the next 2 weeks. That's how much time I give them. That's what I said on November 7th. That was the morning of November 7th. Since I said that, the Predators have lost 9 of 12. They have 3 wins, 4 regulation losses, and 5 overtime losses. So since I said that, they've lost 9 of 12, and I can't keep moving the goalposts.
Okay, my rebuttal to you would be, he doesn't all of a sudden turn into a bad coach. This is a coach and a coaching staff that took a team that many didn't expect much from last season, and they won 20 of their last 30 games. 20 of their last 30 games. And I'm only just counting wins and losses. I'm not counting if they got points or it went into overtime. I'm just saying the last 30 games last year, when things were thick and every game meant something, he was able to push whatever buttons he needed to push and get that team into a playoff, and in playoffs, they had an opportunity to win with the team that many didn't pick to make the playoff. They scored 13 goals. The other team scored 14 goals. It wasn't like it was a landslide. They continued to fight. So to me, my rebuttal would be, he doesn't all of a sudden just turn into a bad coach. There has to be something else going on within this team, because my thing, and listen, people, and Adam, because I'm going to let Adam get back to what he was saying, because I enjoyed every bit of it, and I know the listeners do as well. What I am about to say, in no means am I advocating for it. I want to say that first and foremost, and I want the Nashville Predators to hear me. What I am about to say doesn't mean this is the way I am feeling. If indeed there is this push, and I'm not saying that you're trying to push for the head coach to be removed. I'm not saying that, but you're just giving like, hey, listen, something needs to be done. Maybe this is something you need to start thinking about. If indeed you're going to look at the head coach, why not look at the GM?
That is,
and listen, I am so far from saying Barry needs to be removed from his job title as the sun is from the earth. Okay, so what I'm not saying that Barry should lose his job. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying, that if indeed we are coming to that point where we are saying, hey, listen, now we need to look, because we can't change the player. Now we need to look at the head coach. Who went and got the players?
I hear you. I look,
for this system that we saying these players may not be right for this system. Who went and got them? Who earmarked these players?
Barry Trotz is culpable in this as well.
And I'm not, but what I'm saying is, I'm not saying fire Barry. That is not what I'm saying.
I completely understand that. But you are right. Barry Trotz is culpable in this as well. And I said that I wanted to get a little bit more granular. So I just read some basic statistics. There is a statistic in hockey. It's called expected goals. And I'll try to be as basic with it as I can. It's about shot quality. And, when you're on offense, the better your shot quality, the more chances you have to score. On defense, the better you do of stopping teams from getting good looks, the better you play, right? The Predators last season, in 5-on-5 shot quality per game, finished the season at number 11. Remember that number. They were number 11 last season in expected goals or shot quality at 5-on-5 per game. So far this season, they're 31st. They've gone from 11th to 31st on offense. On defense, shot quality against per game. Last season, the Predators also finished 11th at 5-on-5 per game. This season, they're 23rd. Now, it's not as big of a drop as 11th to 31st, but 11th through 23rd is nothing to ignore.
Still a drop.
What this tells me from afar is that there is something about the process that is broken. I don't understand how this team offensively can go from a top third team in shot quality at 5-on-5 to the second worst team in the league like that. I don't get it. And we mentioned Stamkos and Marchessault, right? They're struggling at 5-on-5. They're on pace for a combined 36 goals after they both scored 40 goals last year. They're not playing well this season, but they're not bad players. Steven Stamkos is going to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame one day. Jonathan Marchessault won playoff MVP 2 years ago with the Vegas Golden Knights when they won the Stanley Cup. But why have they all of a sudden struggled to generate anything at 5-on-5? I just don't get it. And here's my point. The Predator season is, if it hasn't already, it's careening off a cliff. They are one of the worst teams in the league through 25 games. I can't ignore that. And there's one thing that we know about the NHL. They hire and fire coaches quicker than any other league in North American professional sports. Shayna Goldman of The Athletic did a story the other day. The average coach's tenure, according to Goldman, across all 32 NHL teams is 2.3 years, which is the lowest of the four major men's leagues. In the NFL, it's 4.18 years. In the NBA, it's 4 years. In Major League Baseball, it's 3.91 years. In the NHL, it's 2.3. So we know in the NHL, coaches get hired and fired. We've already seen 2 coaching changes so far this season. The first one happened 2 weeks ago today, I believe, when the Boston Bruins fired Jim Montgomery. And Jim Montgomery is a good example. I know that Andrew Burnett is not a terrible coach. He has been the runner-up for the Jack Adams Award, which is given to the Coach of the Year in 2 of the past 3 years. I know that he is not a bad coach. You know who also wasn't a bad coach? Jim Montgomery. When the Bruins fired him, they were 8-9-3. Jim Montgomery, over his 2+ seasons with the Boston Bruins, had the best record in the NHL. His first season with the team, they won 65 games. That's the most, not only in the NHL that season, that's the most in NHL history. He won 65 games. He also won the Jack Adams Award for Coach of the Year. The Bruins won 120 games over 2+ seasons with Jim Montgomery as coach. And the Bruins said, that's not good enough. We're struggling. We have to make a change. And I'm going to share some numbers in the next segment. But there is data that supports the fact that when you fire a coach in the NHL, your team plays better. I don't know why, but I have the numbers to prove it, and I will share them with you on the other side. But here's my point. This season, to borrow a phrase that Jared Stillman likes to use a lot, has been an unmitigated disaster. And there really is nothing else. If this organization is trying to get these players' attention, that what you're doing is not good enough, there really is only one quote unquote simple thing they can do. And that's to make a coaching change. And we played the clip for me from a month ago. And for me, that loss to the Flyers last week, that sort of sent me over the edge. They controlled that game and they blow it.
It was so bad.
They blow it. They give up the tying goal with 12 seconds left and lose in overtime. And then part of me was like, well, let's see how they respond. Then they lost the next game in overtime 3-2 and the following game in overtime 3-2. So I just think that where this team is going, they expected to compete for the playoffs. They expected to be in the running for the Stanley Cup. And instead, as I said, they have roughly the same odds of having the best odds in the NHL draft lottery than they do making the playoffs. And that's why at this point, if I were in charge, Derek, listeners, I would make a coaching change. I want to hear from all of you. We already have some phones lined up. I can't wait to read the text line 615-737-1025. And look, if the Predators go on a run, I'm going to take my medicine and I will admit I was wrong. And if Andrew Burnett wants to come on the program and hear me say it, I'll invite him to do so. And this is nothing personal against Andrew Burnett. I just think that I have seen enough from this team this season that I think it's time for the Predators, if I were in charge, to do it. 615-737-1025. We'll take your reaction. I also have some more information that I want to share. Coming up next, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025, 1063, The Game.
Zen Sports just picked the grand prize for the November Big Game Sweepstakes, and they are running it back in December with the Big Game Sweepstakes College Edition. People, they were doing the pros, now they're doing the college edition. This time, instead of going to the big game for the pros, they're giving you a chance to go to the very first big game in the new college football tournament with a grand prize of $10,000 cash and 2 tickets to the biggest college football game of 2025. Yes, the one in Atlanta, and the ability to earn entries on every bet you place in December. It doesn't get much better than this, people. If you don't win the grand prize, don't worry. You'll also have a shot to win one of 10 small prizes, which grant you $1,000 toward any college football game in 2025. So what are you waiting for? Head to zensports.com/sweepstakes for a full list of rules and earn $100 no danger first wager. That's Zen Sports, where betting just got better. And remember, gambling problems, call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 years or older to bet here in Tennessee.
D. Mace Vingan and Donick 1025, 1063 The Game. Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. If you missed it in the previous segment, I've made the case as to why the Predators should make a coaching change. And we've got some calls and some texts that we'll get to. But before we do that, Derek, there is one thing that I wanted to share. So if you'll recall, Derek, we had this conversation with Willie a couple of weeks ago. It was a spicy conversation. I think it was one of our better hours of radio since we've been a trio.
Mm-hmm.
And I shared numbers of the teams that made coaching changes last season. I believe there were 7 teams that made coaching changes last season, most notably the Edmonton Oilers.
Mm-hmm.
They fired their coach after about 10 or 11 games. The coach they hired, Chris Knobloch, from the time they hired him through the end of the regular season, they had the best record in the NHL, and they made it to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. They fell 1 win short of winning the championship. But I took those numbers and I said, before the coaching changes, this was their record. But after the coaching changes, this was their record, and they were better. And Willie accused me of cherry picking. So
yes, he did.
I
That's
did
for
not.
sure.
I did not take that. I did not take that lying down.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to the NHL Stats and Information Department. They do a wonderful job with this sort of thing. I bug them all the time. So this is what I asked them to do. This was a couple of weeks ago. I said, will you pull for me all of the teams that made coaching changes between the 2013-14 season and the 2023-2024 season? So that was last season. So we have a 10-year sample
Mm-hmm.
of teams making coaching changes. If I'm not mistaken, within that 10-year sample, there were 48 in-season coaching changes over 10 years. As we say, in the NHL, these things happen a lot. So I asked the NHL Stats and Information Department, I would love the team's overall record before they make the coaching change and after they make the coaching change. So between 2013 and 2024, teams that fired their coaches, when you combined all of the records of those teams at the time they fired their coaches, they had a winning percentage combined of 0.412, 41.2%. They had a points percentage of 476. So a winning percentage of 412, a points percentage of 476. Those are the teams that fired their coaches and their records at the time of the firing. After they made the coaching changes, the record. Remember, winning percentage before, 412. Winning percentage after, 496. Points percentage before, 476. Points percentage after, 544. So that's 10 years worth of data. That's not cherry picking. That's 10 years worth of data that shows that when NHL teams make coaching changes, and I don't know why this is, Derek, but it is clear that teams perform better in the standings after they make coaching changes. There have been 2 teams that have made coaching changes this season, the Boston Bruins, as I alluded to earlier, and the St. Louis Blues. Funny enough, Derek, the St. Louis Blues weren't planning on firing their coach until the Bruins fired their coach, and they wanted the Bruins coach so badly, they fired their own coach to hire the Bruins coach. It's very complicated. The Blues and the Bruins, since making their coaching changes, have a combined record of 6-2-1. That's points in 7 of 9 games, wins in 6 of 9 games. It works. I don't know why, but it does. And that's part of it as well. The Predators are trying to make the playoffs. The Predators want to be competitive. And there is 10 years worth of data that shows you that if a team makes a coaching change, it helps in the standings. Now, is it a guarantee that if the Predators were to make a coaching change that they would make the playoffs? No, it's not. But they would probably perform better in the standings if they did.
Yeah, okay. The question to you would be this, because I understand what you're saying. You have the data to back it up. For what reason it happens, they get a bump, we don't know. I mean, you can say a change, a change in a voice change in the locker room may re-energize some guys, and for whatever reason they go out and they play with this enthusiasm, and they end up winning games that otherwise they probably would have lost with the other coach. So my question to you would be, are they too far into this now to make the change? And even if they get a bump, is it going to be enough to ultimately get them to where they want to go? And that's the playoffs.
It's a good question. There is no guarantee that if they were to do this, which I'm not expecting them to, because Barry Trotz has been clear during his weekly interviews with Jared. And by the way, Barry Trotz on with Jared Stillman today at 5:00. I can't wait to listen to that. But there's no guarantee that it happens. You're right. But I'm just telling you that if the Predators are looking to change their fortunes, I have 10 years worth of data that shows you that it will likely happen if you make a coaching change. Now, there's another question we have on our text line. I know I'm going to get it a lot, and then we'll get to your phones. Somebody asked, I'm sorry I don't have it up in front of me, who would I hire to replace Andrew Burnett? Now, I don't think this needs to be a situation that we saw when the Predators made an in-season coaching change about 5 years ago when they fired Peter Laviolette. They hired John Hines the next day or 2 days later, and he was the full-time head coach. I don't think you need to do that. I don't think you need to rush into making that decision. Unless there's somebody, like I said, the Blues, they fired their coach because the Bruins fired their coach. They wanted the Bruins coach so badly that they fired their coach so that they could have the Bruins coach. I don't know if there's anybody out there for the Predators in this scenario. What I would probably do, and it's not the most exciting thing, is I would promote Todd Richards to interim head coach. Todd Richards is an assistant coach with the Predators, has, I believe, 6 or 7 years of head coaching experience with the Blue Jackets in the Wild. So I wouldn't rush to make a decision. I would promote Todd Richards to interim coach and let him figure it out for the rest of the season, and then see if somebody emerges over the next several months that makes you want to hire them.
Okay, here's another.
Sure. And then we'll get to your phones.
Rebuttal, or sort of another, I don't know, scenario or
Sure.
or whatnot, instead of, firing the head coach. Because sometimes, you don't want to go to that extreme, because that's usually like the last resort. When things haven't been working, you figure I got to do something. And what's the one thing that can give you a bump? Removing the head coach of whatever team, whether football, it doesn't matter. Okay, in this scenario, before you change the head coach, should you sit down as a GM with your head coach? And I'm not saying that Barry hasn't done this already, but sit down with your head coaches. Hey, listen, I know this is what we expected of these players that we brought in. And I know the system that you have. And I know, because I've watched it and I played against it, what it entails and what it takes. Maybe try changing the system a bit. Cater it to the players that you have right now and see how that works before we get to that point of, okay, because you want to try to exhaust every avenue
right
before you, because when you do that you do it and there's no going back for that.
Correct.
From that, or no coming back from that, excuse me. So should Barry have a talk with Coach Bruno and say, listen, let's change some things schematically and see how that works? And again, they might have talked about that already.
I imagine they've probably had this conversation.
So before you even get to that point, and you can't trade players, well, you can, but you got to get another team to agree to take the contract. If we can't do any of that, then we may have to taper the scheme just a little bit.
It's another good question. And I believe Andrew Burnett has alluded to making some tweaks to the system, and we'll see if it works. But as 25 games is a large enough sample. Like I said, those shot quality numbers at 5-on-5 per game on offense from 11th to 31st, on defense from 11th to 23rd. That says to me, again, that something about the process is broken. To go from where they were to where they are in one season, that says to me that there is something off with what's going on. And hold that thought, because we do have a couple of callers who have been waiting patiently. Chris is on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Chris, thank you for waiting. Please go ahead.
Hey, guys. Hey, I don't pretend to know, why the Predators got off to such a bad start, but being a fan of the Preds and the Titans over the years, it's uncanny, some of the similarities of how they have mirrored each other over the years. And in particular, this season, I believe both teams were the biggest or one of the biggest spenders in free agency. And all my years of watching sports, when you go out to buy a team or bring in big names, it rarely turns into a championship. I don't know why, the personalities or whatever. But I just, I know Barry Trotz is, and the coach are trying to figure things out. I don't know what, maybe a coaching change will help, but just like the Titans, they went out and spent a ton of money on free agents. And what did get? They're just like the Preds, one of the worst teams in the league.
Thanks for calling, Chris. Yeah, look, I mean, we talked a lot about the Titans spending, and people have, I've heard this quite a bit. Like, I've heard it, people say it to Jared, and I think Robbie and Joe have talked about it too. Like you're so hard on the Titans. Why aren't you hard on the Predators? Well, I mean, the Predator, and this may in a way, this may undercut my argument that the Predators were a playoff team last year. The Titans were not a playoff team last year. The Titans have been languishing at the bottom of the standings for the past couple of years. The Predators were a surprise playoff team. And this is something else I've seen, Derek. We did have one texter that said, hey, they're only 8 points out. Maybe they can string some games together. They'll be right back in it. What have the Predators shown you this season to suggest they can do that? Now, before you say, hey, last season they went on an 18-game point streak. How common do you think 18-game point streaks are in NHL history? They're not very common. And it was a good run. Don't get me wrong. It was captivating to watch. But also thing is, it's a different team. It's a different makeup. You brought in different players. You brought in older players. Like, just because last year's team did it doesn't mean this year's team is going to do it. This team has had one winning streak all season. After they started 0-5, they won 3 games in a row. Since then, they followed every win with a bad loss, or maybe not every loss is bad, but they played Winnipeg a couple weeks ago, the best team in the league. I had a really good game. I was there. Then they lay an egg 2 nights later against New Jersey. That's just the story of the season. I haven't seen anything from this team to suggest that they are going to be able to do that. Mark is on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Mark, thank you for waiting. Please go ahead.
Oh, Lord. Boy, y'all must know when I'm calling in. Boy, I sure do get put on hold.
I'm sorry, brother.
Holy. No, I know, Adam. Hey, y'all have a good Thanksgiving, man.
We did. Thank you.
Yeah. What's up, D-May?
What's going on?
I'm going to agree with more of everything you said, Adam, and more of everything D-May said. Maybe Burnett needs to simplify the offense or start setting some star players, maybe call up some guys from Milwaukee. I think that's their affiliation. I mean, they got to do something, but a lot of this is on Barry Trotz, like D-Mace was saying. It is. He's the one that paid out the money. He's the one that went and got these guys. They're struggling bad. They're in rebuild, most definitely, man. And Adam, I think you said a long time ago, last year sometime, wasn't it a Predators coach that went and got hired with Columbus and did last with about 20 games, and they got rid of him? I think you said that on Joe's show one day.
Maybe I'll have to think back to what I said.
Yeah, but I'm like you, Adam. Maybe they need to get rid of Burnett. Maybe they need a new voice. Maybe they've laid down on Burnett, man. I mean, hey, we miss John Hines. John Hines, I got back, by the way.
John Hines doing pretty well for himself right now with the Minnesota Wild. So just saying.
Yeah, he is, Adam. And I mean, Steelman wanted to run him out of town. Give Steelman to about January, and he'll turn on Barry, and he'll turn on Burnett. Give him to January, man. It's coming.
All right. We'll see.
Yeah, we're starting the clock.
All right, Mark.
Yeah, you know he does, Adam. But hey, man, y'all have a good day and stuff. Hey, later on, G Mace. We'll see y'all, man.
Appreciate you, Mark. By the way, the Minnesota Wild, the best record in the NHL right now. So just saying. I'm just saying. But I'm not. This is not about John Hines.
Yeah,
I like to needle Jared about John Hines, but we do have to go to break. But we do have some texts that I do want to get to as well, and I really appreciate the participation. Nobody has yet to call me like a stupid idiot, and if you want to do that, you can.
It's coming.
I'm sure it will. But there is something that Andrew Burnett hasn't done, and I've talked about this a couple of times. There is something that Andrew Burnett has not done, to my knowledge, this season that really grinds my gears, and that's part of the reason why I am where I am. And we'll get to that next. Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3, The Game.
How mystifying to you is that lack of offense, given the people in this room who have scored so much in their careers before?
I mean, I have some thoughts on that, but it's yeah. Like I said, it's you got guys that can put the puck in the net for sure, but we need to find ways to generate, getting open and guys seeing things and guys finding seams, and it's tough. I mean, it's tough to score. It's the hardest thing to do in the NHL, to score goals. And obviously we got guys that have done it. It's a little different this year. You're in a funk and you try to find ways. I mean, we're not going to quit here, but we need to find a way, and myself included. And it's it's tough.
That was Steven Stamkos after the Predators lost 3-2 to his former club, the Tampa Bay Lightning, on Black Friday. Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Derek, I know it's not the wide receiver translator, but let's use the professional athlete translator. You hear Steven Stamkos say that. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking Steven Stamkos is a veteran and a smart guy. He knows, because he said I can tell you a bunch of things. I can tell you. But then after he said that, he was like, I don't want to go. I don't want to tell you. He basically gave you some things, hey, listen, we all know what it takes. We have the guys that can do it. We just got to find a way to get it done. He didn't get into the weeds because initially, and you could tell by his hesitation, like, I can answer this question, but I don't want to answer it because the real answer I want to give may cause a rift within the locker room, or may seem like there's a division in the locker room, and that's not what I want. He's a veteran player. He understands it. He's a smart player. I'm not going to give you things to talk about in the media. So I'm just going to give you the basic stuff that you can see and understand. This is what we need to do. We got guys that can score goals. We just got to find a way to do it, myself included. That's what Jeffrey Simmons should have said instead of the hangover, or that's what Brownlee should have said instead of cold weather. Stamkos understands that. He's a veteran guy. He's a winning player. So he understands what he can say and what he can't say. He's been in situations, I'm sure, like this before. So that's what it tells me about him. But it also tells me that there's more than one or two problems going on.
He's clearly frustrated.
Yeah.
You can
and
hear
I don't
it in his
think
voice.
it could be changed this season.
I mean, it's a good question. It's a problem that they certainly have. And here's one thing I want to point out as well. So the Predators, I mentioned their 5-on-5 play. They've scored 29 goals at 5-on-5 in 29 goals at 5-on-5 in 25 games. So that's an average of like 1.2. That's bad. Mm-hmm. The Predators, their shooting percentage at 5-on-5 is 5.4%. That's the worst in the league. Now, those things tend to even out. Like, there should be a point at some point where the Predators start scoring more goals at 5-on-5. Here's where I'm concerned. It would be one thing if the Predators had that shooting percentage, and let's say they were 8th in the league in shot quality per game. That means they're getting goalied every day. Mm-hmm. Like, they're playing the best goalie in the league every night, standing on his head, as we like to say. The fact that the Predators are 31st in expected goals for per game says to me that I'm not sure how much that shooting percentage is going to change, because they're not doing the right things to get to those high percentage scoring areas. And we were talking about this off air. This team was good at that last year. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden they're really bad at it. Like, it's like, it is up to the coach to get the best out of the players. As I said, Steven Stamkos, he's averaging 0.28 points per game. That's the worst average of his career. Steven Stamkos, there were signs over his final years in Tampa Bay that he was starting to not be the same player at 5-on-5, but I didn't expect it to be this bad. Mm-hmm. And I think that is partially a reflection of the coaching. Same thing with Jonathan Marchessault. Mm-hmm. I didn't expect him to score 40 goals again, but to have one goal at 5-on-5 in 25 games, he didn't all of a sudden become a bad player.
Yeah, and that's the part that is troubling. He didn't all of a sudden become a bad player, but he's not playing good hockey. And what is the reason? We look at last season and obviously, and you said it, Adam, how many times is a team going to go on an 18-point streak?
I actually looked this up because this is just the statistical nerd that I am. I believe there have been 23 point streaks in NHL history of at least 18 games. The league is more than 100 years old.
So it doesn't happen often.
No.
Okay. So, but I look at last year and I said, well, how was that change able to happen last year? Because I think we were saying the opposite thing last year that we're saying this year. Yeah, last year it was the goalie, and UC Soros starting off slow, and it just seemed like everybody was trying to figure out what's going on with UC. So much so, don't sign him back, bring up Askarov, and don't sign him to this huge contract. Look at him, and then all of a sudden, the UC that we knew showed up, and it cured a lot of the ailments that may have been going on. But what we saw was the goalie wasn't playing well, but it seemed like some other areas were doing well. But because the goalie wasn't playing well, it was like, man, we just can't pull out a game. The goalie gets better, the team gets better. They go on a streak, they get into the playoffs, and UC plays damn good hockey.
He was not the issue in the playoffs.
He was not the issue in the playoffs.
They couldn't score goals.
What have we said about UC this year? He hasn't been the issue.
If not for UC Soros, this team would be by far the worst team in the NHL.
Exactly. So it's not because of UC that the Nashville Predators are where they're at now, which is a concern for me, because if it was UC, I would believe that the UC that we know, he'll get it together, and the team is doing well outside of what UC's doing. UC will get it together and everything will start meshing together and we'll be fine. But this year's not UC. It's more than UC Soros. It's other areas.
He is the least of their concerns, in my opinion.
So how confident are we that those other areas will be able to change like that, the way UC changed last year? And I understand what Willie says. Man, they were close. Look at these. It hit the upright pole. It hit the side of the net. They're close. They're close. Well, how many times are we going to say they're close?
Right.
Before we say, you know what, it's not going to happen.
I need results.
Exactly.
I need results at this point. When you have won 7 of your 25 games, like I said this even a couple of weeks ago, we played well, but lost train has left the station.
Mm-hmm.
That left the station weeks ago for me. So I don't care if the process is right if they're not really winning games. They need to win games. But I did say one thing that Andrew Brunette, and then we'll get to your calls. One thing that Andrew Brunette has not done this season from afar. Again, I'm just looking at this from afar. One thing that he has not done this season that really bothers me. We've talked about the players that have struggled, particularly the top players. Mm-hmm. As far as I can tell, Andrew Brunette has not held any of his top players accountable for their performances. We've seen Luke Evangelista scratched. We've seen Michael McCarron scratched. We've seen Philip Tomasino scratched and then traded. We've seen Dante Fabro scratched and then waived. But we haven't seen Andrew Brunette openly hold his top players accountable for their performances. Now, Barry Trotz, again, who will be on with Jared today at 5 o'clock. One thing that Barry Trotz is fond of saying when we're talking about the struggles of the veteran players, and I'm paraphrasing here, I'm the guy that scratched the greatest goal scorer in the NHL. He did. When he was coach of the Washington Capitals, he scratched Alex Ovechkin for a game in October of 2015. And you're going to laugh at the reason, because Ovechkin overslept and missed a morning skate. And I'm not kidding you. I went back and looked at this. He set his alarm to PM instead of AM. But he missed a morning skate. The captain of the team, the best goal scorer of all time. Not officially, because he still has to pass Wayne Gretzky, but we all agree that Alex Ovechkin is the greatest goal scorer of all time. Barry Trotz scratched him because he did not meet the standards. And I know this is different because that's oversleeping and missing a morning skate versus your play on the ice. But Barry Trotz did it. Barry Trotz scratched Alex Ovechkin. He set an example. I want to see Andrew Brunette hold his top players accountable. I've mentioned Jonathan Marchessault many times. It just feels like, and Derek, I know you know this, when you're a professional athlete, the better players, they get longer leashes than the depth players. Steven Stamkos is going to get a longer leash than Luke Evangelista. Brady Shea is going to get a longer leash than Mark Del Gaizo. We know that. But I don't like the optics of it. I don't like that it appears that Andrew Burnett has not held his top players accountable for their poor performances.
Well, we discussed this a few weeks ago about, what is it that Coach Bruno can do, Burnett can do to sort of jolt some energy into this team. He's changed lines. He's scratched, guys that are on the third and fourth line. He's did all these things except start at the top and didn't work his way down. And I understand why, because like you said, listen, your A1 players and the players you count on, they get a longer leash than, say, the back end of your roster. And I get that. I understand it. It's sports, it's life. I get it. Should it be that way? Probably not, but it is. But it has to come a time where, as you're evaluating your team, as you're looking at your team, you've made all these changes that you can possibly make. Because mind you, the roster's looking at you too. The roster's looking at you. And the roster is saying, man, you're doing all this stuff with these lower level guys. It still ain't changing nothing. Maybe you got to start at the top and work your way down. I'm not saying benching for 2-3 games. I'm not saying possibly even taking them out of the lineup. But move them down. Move them down a peg. Drop them a peg. Let them play with those guys that are in the third and fourth line. Or, yes, sit him out of game. Who says that you can't do that? I'm sure Nashville Predators fan base wouldn't be mad if you set one of these marquee guys just to try to jolt some energy into somebody or this team. I'm sure the fan base wouldn't look at you and say, you crazy for doing that. No, they wouldn't, because they're probably looking at it as I'm looking at it like, man, you've tried just about everything. Because if you ain't going to do that, then maybe what Adam is saying about replacing the coach is probably the best course of action. Because you're not trying to, in a sense, protect your job, because you're just going for the low-hanging fruit. You're not going for the big name guys. And again, I'm not saying that guys need to be benched 2 or 3 games. They may not even need to be benched, but take away some of that ice time and see how they like that. Until you start to prove that you can do the things that we're asking, I gotta take some of your minutes away and see how guys react to that. If they don't react to it in a good way, then you ain't got a good team.
Look, we mentioned John Hines and the Wild, but I remember John Hines early in his tenure, and I just pulled up a story that I wrote from that time. There was a game where he gave Matt Duchene, Philip Forsberg significantly less ice time than they usually get. And John Hines said, quote, "You've got to earn your ice time, and you've got to keep your ice time. That's the only way to eliminate complacency." And you know what? I have not seen that from Andrew Burnett.
Not with the top guys anyway.
Not with the top guys. Will is on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Will, thank you for waiting. Please go ahead.
I would agree to fire the coach, but wait till after the season's over just so we can bottom out. I'm tired of the mushy middle, and I have faith, unlike everybody else in the Nashville fan base. Like, we always got to stay at least mushy middle or the fan. But I think we can go 1 year where we just suck and actually get a prospect that's higher up in the draft, and then replace Burnett with Carl Taylor down at, I think, Milwaukee. I think he deserves a shot. I don't know if he's going to be a great coach over there, but I think he's proven that he's waited out his tenure, waited in line, and I think he deserves a shot.
Well, thank you for the call. And that, I mean, look, I've heard that as well. I mean, the Predators have rarely been bad enough to draft near the top of the draft.
I don't think they're going to get no better.
You did say this during the break. You were expecting them to stay among the worst teams in the league this season.
I expect them to say, because my thing is, like I said earlier, if it was UC Saros, I would have faith that UC will be able to get it together and they'll be fine. I haven't seen enough of these guys. These are new guys you're bringing onto this team. Yeah, I know what they did at their other with their other teams. That means nothing, because they're not doing it here in Nashville. And I'm not sure that they're going to be able to turn it around. They can fool me and they can turn it around, or I can be wrong. But what I'm looking at and what I'm seeing is a team that I don't think will turn it around. I think they're going to get an opportunity to draft that guy that they want, that big name center that they've been looking for, or another defense, they will be able to get that guy in this year's draft, I believe.
Well, if you go to the website moneypuck.com, which is a popular website with advanced analytics, the Predators have a 6.7% chance of making the playoffs, according to MoneyPuck. They have a 6.5% chance of having the number 1 pick in the NHL draft.
It's just about even, huh?
Yeah. And look, I am prepared for the Predators to go to Toronto tomorrow and win 6-1, and they'll go on a run, and I'll look like a complete jackass.
If that happened, that'd be great. I would love it.
I will pull a Jared Stillman, and I will just give myself credit for galvanizing them if they
like a radio show host should do.
Right, exactly. But look, this is that I've laid out my case. You can agree, you can disagree, you can call me names. That's fine. I just think that I've seen enough from this team this season to think that if there really isn't much they can do, right? Even if Barry Trotz wanted to make changes to the roster, he can't. The players he signed, they have no movement clauses. They have full control of their situation. They have pricey cap hits. Teams can't usually make those things work. The quote unquote simplest thing to do to try to send tremors through that dressing room is to make a coaching change. And if it were up to me, that's what I would do. But we'll see how the Predators respond tomorrow night against the Toronto Maple Leafs. And by the way, Toronto is known, Derek, as the center of the hockey universe. The spotlight there is much brighter than it is anywhere else. And if this team goes to Toronto and lays an egg, it's going to get ugly. So for their sake, they better play well tomorrow and they better win. 615-737-1025. We'll get back into the NFL. Coming up next, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063, The Game.
Hey, this is Derek Mason, and you heard me tell you about Dr. Lodge and his staff at Cool Springs MD for some time now. And if you set out to lose weight, chances are it's not your first time setting a resolution to shed some extra pounds, only to face disappointment. But at Cool Springs MD, Dr. Lodge and his team understands the frustration of the cycle, and that is why they offer a different approach to weight loss. Their comprehensive weight loss program is led by Dr. Jeffrey Lodge and addresses the root cause of weight gain with tailored nutrition, exercise, blood test supplements, and more. They will customize a program specific to you and no one else. So connect with Dr. Lodge at CoolSpringsMD.com today to schedule your appointment for a personalized weight loss plan just for you. That's Cool Springs MD, where your weight loss journey becomes a success story.
D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Derek Mason and Adam Vingan here with you today. So, Derek, a former member of the Tennessee Titans, is in the news, and not for the right reasons. The NFL has suspended Houston Texans linebacker, former Tennessee Titans linebacker, Azeez Al-Shaair, for 3 games for repeated violations of player safety rules after his hit to the head of Trevor Lawrence on Sunday. I don't know if there has been any ruling on Trevor Lawrence because, by the way, the Titans do play the Jaguars this week. So I guess we should expect Mac Jones for the Jaguars against the Titans. We'll see. But Al-Shaair was ejected in the second quarter of Houston's win against Jacksonville on Sunday. And Trevor Lawrence suffered a concussion on the play. So this is not the first issue, trouble with the law, so to speak, the NFL law, I should say, that Al-Shaair has had this season. It happened just a couple of weeks ago with the Titans. Al-Shaair was flagged and fined more than $11,000 for a late hit out of bounds on Tony Pollard. He also was fined roughly $12,000 earlier this year after he punched Bears running back Rashawn Johnson on the sideline in week 2. According to ESPN, that occurred during a scuffle that started after Al-Shaair's hard shot on Caleb Williams near the sideline. And that play, by the way, according to ESPN, was not flagged. So David has the clip of Texans general manager Nick Caserio addressing. We'll hear from Nick Caserio first, and then I want to share with you, Derek, and I know you've already seen it, the letter from the league that they gave to Azeez Al-Shaair after suspending him for 3 games. But this was Texans GM Nick Caserio.
When you go back, let's look at this season. Okay, we had multiple situations, multiple examples. All right, 2 really good players, I would say. Branch ejected against Green Bay, right? Plays the next week against us. Okay, Derwin ejected. All right, got suspended for 1 game. And Derwin's a great player, and Derwin's had some other situations that have come up. And I'd say even going back here, a player that we know well organizationally here, Kareem Jackson. Kareem's a good player. Was ejected, fined, ejected, fined, ejected, and then suspended after 3 games. So we're going to say Azeez Al-Shaair, who nobody embodies our program more than Azeez, what he's about, what he's been through. You all know his story. There's not a more selfless individual, more about the team who's earned the respects that represents everything that we want this program to be about. I mean, this morning he was at a United Way event. So we're talking about some of the commentary that has been made about his character, about the person that he is, about what his intentions are from people that, quite frankly, don't know anything about Azeez Al-Shaair. Okay. And for the league to make some of the commentary that he made about lack of sportsmanship, lack of coachability, lack of paying attention to the rules, quite frankly, it's embarrassing.
That was Texans general manager Nick Caserio defending his player Azeez Al-Shaair. And he referenced a letter that John Runyon, who now works for the NFL, former player, now works for the NFL, that I believe he gave Al-Shaair after giving him the suspension. Quote, "Your lack of sportsmanship and respect for the game of football and all those who play, coach, and enjoy watching it is troubling and does not reflect the core values of the NFL. Your continued disregard for NFL playing rules puts the health and safety of both you and your opponents in jeopardy and will not be tolerated." What did you make of that particular passage from John Runyon in explaining his the suspension to Azeez Al-Shaair?
Man, it's again, when you start to try to legislate someone's intent, or start to legislate, how a person's thinking or whatnot, I think you're getting into murky waters. Has Azeez had personal files before? Yes, he has. Has he been suspended before? No, he hasn't. Nick Caserio did go down a line of guys that he knows that have been either fined or suspended. And he went down the list like, this guy was fined, this guy, end up getting ejected. This guy was fined again, ejected. This guy was fined again. Then this guy gets, sentenced to 1 game. He has to miss 1 game. But it never got to a point, it never escalated to a point where that guy went from not ever being suspended to 3 games. That's the hypocrisy of it all, is that you go, and again, did he deserve to be suspended? More than likely, yeah, for a game, just suspended for a game. But to go directly to 3 games, I think that is hypocritical, because other guys, and you're talking about a guy that has never been suspended in his career. Now, has he been fined? Absolutely, he's been fined. And I'm not going to try to sit here and justify that.
Just this season, he's been fined twice.
Yes. So typically, you'll get fined a few times, but they don't go automatically to 3 games. They usually, a game, you get suspended, game check, and then you move on. And then the next goes to 2 to 3 games. But they don't just automatically, at least not to my knowledge, automatically go to 3 games. Hell, they allow Burfict to do all that crap that he did.
We did have a texter on our text line that said that Azeez Al-Shaair is the new Vontaze Burfict.
No, he's nowhere near Vontaze Burfict. But Vontaze Burfict, it got to a point where he was doing it. You just felt, I think he was doing it deliberately. Like he was just like, he was just like, the hell with it.
He was reckless.
He was completely reckless. And I think even some of his teammates realized he was reckless. I think in this situation, a 1-game suspension would have been good enough. But if you read the beginning of that letter, and this is why I think they suspended him for 3 games instead of 1, which is completely wrong again for suspending him for 3 games. Jon Runyan put in that letter, you removed your helmet after you had already been disqualified and started going back at the other guys. He was arguing. But John, of all people, and the other guys on that panel, they should know in that situation, a heated situation, just because I take off my helmet and I'm fussing back and forth, if I don't then engage with that guy, then okay. It was just a bunch of talking, a bunch of yapping. Yeah, you took your helmet off, but ultimately you walked off the field. Yeah, it may have taken you a minute, but you left. You didn't then engage in more fighting or more pushing. I wonder how many games the guys got, or how much they were fined for the guys that actually initiated it all. Because Dominique Foxworth, who I played with in Baltimore, said something that he was completely spot on in regards to the league in this situation. Don't try to normalize bad things. Yes, Azeez did what he did. Yes, as a player, you go in there and you protect your guy. But that's not the right thing. Don't try to make that like that's the right thing to do. Like, yeah, you protected your player, but also you need to be fined too, because what Azeez did caused for him to be suspended. But then the initial the stuff after that should have been on both guys, more so the other guys, because they could have been mad and upset. They could have just been japping and talking to him, or you could have pushed them once. And it could have been over with. Everybody could have dispersed. But then the sideline got into it. And then it became this melee. Yes, I understand it started with Azeez, but that doesn't mean we're going to excuse the bad that the other guys did as well. Let's not lose sight of that. Again, suspend Azeez for a game, but to automatically go to 3 games, which he will appeal, which I'm sure they'll get it down to 1 or 2.
He is appealing the decision.
Yeah, he will appeal, and they get down to 1, I'm pretty sure. But to automatically go to 3 games, and I think your reasoning, I believe he did it because Azeez took off his helmet. I think that's what, because if you just base it upon the hit, it's a 1-game suspension and a fine.
So in the NHL, they have a Department of Player Safety that doles out supplemental discipline in the forms of fines or suspensions. And one thing that they point out when they're determining the level of discipline, they look at whether the player that was on the other side of the play suffered an injury. Did he have to leave the game? Did he come back? Did he stay in the game? That's something they take into account. Trevor Lawrence left the game, suffered a concussion, and it does say, according to ESPN, that the Jaguars have not made a decision about the quarterback. Doug Peterson said Monday that the team would wait until Lawrence clears the concussion protocol before deciding whether to shut him down for the remainder of the season. He also said they would take Lawrence's sprained left AC joint into consideration, although he added that the earlier injury did not get aggravated by Al-Shair's hit. So perhaps, again, we'll see Mac Jones against the Titans. But another thing they do, I'll have to look up the exact language. One thing that they do, Derek, in the NHL is they have repeat offender status. And I think it's less about like the accumulation of, well, this person's been suspended 3 times. I think it's over the course of a certain period of time. So let's say a player in the NHL, if I'm wrong about this, I will correct myself later. Let's say a player in the NHL has been suspended 4 times, but 3 of those suspensions came within this, outside of the statute of limitations, so to speak. They're not considered a repeat offender because maybe there was a year or 2 in between the suspensions. But I just think the accumulation of the fact that he had just been fined for a late hit against Tony Pollard. He was fined for punching an opponent earlier in the season. I wonder if the NFL just said, clearly, this guy isn't getting the message.
So you suspend him a game. I
mean, I can understand your point about like going from fine, Nick Casario's point as well, going fine to 3 games. I might agree with you that is a little harsh. Maybe it should have been 1, maybe 2. But I'm curious. I mean, maybe it's, and look, it happened against a quarterback, right? I mean, if it happens against a less, a quote unquote lesser position, maybe it doesn't have the same effect.
But now what they're doing is, and I see it playing on ESPN. Now they're basically going through his whole career, and they're picking out instances where, they slow-mo it and they show him, hitting a guy high or this and that. It's like, seriously, this is how we're going to do it now. My thing is that if he been suspended before a game and then he did this, then okay, the 3-game suspension is warranted. I get it. But to automatically go to 3 games when this guy has never been suspended in his career, has he been fined? Yes, he's been fined for unnecessary roughness or late hits. Has he been fined? Yes. But to automatically go, because you're setting a precedent, which you haven't set before. Like, typically it's fine, suspension. And then if you do it again, another suspension, which tallies more games. Now, if you want to do this and say, well, listen, he doesn't come back, and you got to explain it. If he doesn't come back until Lawrence clears protocol, then okay, do that. And it may take a game or 2. But don't just automatically, for a guy that hasn't been suspended at all, automatically level 3 games. And it wasn't because of the hit that you're leveling 3 games. I want everybody to read the whole letter that Jon Runyan
You know what we'll do? Yeah. We will look at that letter more than the passage that I read. We'll do that next, but we'll get your thoughts on former Tennessee Titans linebacker Azeez Al-Shaair, suspended 3 games for a hit that concussed Trevor Lawrence last week. 615-737-1025. Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game. D-Mace, Vinkin and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Programming note, normally we have Clark Lee on Tuesdays at around this time. He won't be joining us this week. I'm sure we'll get him again before Vanderbilt plays its bowl game, because Vanderbilt, despite losing a tough game to Tennessee over the weekend, is indeed going bowling. So
eligible.
So congratulations to Clark Lee and Vanderbilt on that. We look forward to talking to him soon. But we're talking Azeez Al-Shaair, suspended 3 games by the NFL for his hit on Trevor Lawrence. And Derek, you mentioned the letter that Jon Runyan sent to Azeez Al-Shaair about his suspension. And there was a passage that you wanted us, because we read the passage about the lack of sportsmanship, but there was a passage right before that you wanted us to look at. And this is the passage you're referring to. Quote, "After the illegal hit, you proceeded to engage in a brawl, which you escalated when you pulled an opponent down to the ground by his face mask. After the referee announced that you were disqualified for the hit and your unsportsmanlike acts, you removed your helmet and re-engaged with your opponent while walking down and across the field, which started another physical confrontation near the end zone."
Okay. Unless I didn't see after he pulled his helmet off, this is because ultimately I think this is why they fined him 3 games, not necessarily for the hit. Because I think if it would have just been a hit, it would have been a 1-game suspension. Because of the other fines that he's gotten for unnecessary roughness, it would have been a 1-game suspension. But in that whole process, see, as we tell our kids, 2 wrongs don't make a right, but sometimes we forget that when it comes to adults. We try to justify whatever decision we're going to make. And I think his justification, Jon Runyan, was, well, he started a melee. Well, let's sort of unpack this. I'm going to give you, because I watched all of it up until the point Azeez took off his helmet and started, talking back. He didn't engage with the Philadelphia player. The Philadelphia player, the Jacksonville player. The Jacksonville player could have easily just walked away when Azeez took off his helmet and started yapping. And Azeez player, one of his Houston players, came and they grabbed him. They were in between him and the other guy. The other guy could have just walked away. Everything. He had been suspended. He had been ejected, everything. The other guy could have walked away. But the other guy engaged as well. They didn't engage physically. They engaged verbally. There was no physical altercation. There was a verbal altercation. So please, Runyan, when you say that, say it was a verbal altercation, not a physical altercation, because you're misleading people so that your narrative can be fit why you suspended him. He didn't re-engage with him. He took off his helmet and they started arguing back and forth. Then he ended up leaving the field. But okay, he hit Lawrence, bad play, fine him, suspend him for a game. Then his player comes in, Lawrence's player, which, okay, I get it. I understand it doesn't make it right, but I get you trying to.
You're defending your teammate.
Yeah. So his player comes up, and Azeez doesn't see him, and he gives him a shove to the back of the head into the ground. Then he shoves him again. And Azeez is trying to get up, and everybody's coming at him. So what is he supposed to do? He's protecting himself. I would have did the same damn thing. I'd have protected myself too. And if that meant grabbing someone's helmet to protect myself, I would have done that. But he didn't start like necessarily. I know the act of hitting Lawrence started the pushing, but then after that, if you're going to then put the onus on Azeez to sort of be able to turn that light switch off, then you should put the onus on the Jacksonville players to be able to shut their light switch off as well. Because after he hit Lawrence, I understand the tight end coming in and mushing him to the ground twice, but then everybody else from the Jaguars come over as well. So he's supposed to just sit there and get mushed to the ground and not say anything. He's protecting himself. So that part to me could have been taken out. If you're going to suspend him, suspend him for the hit. That doesn't look like what you did. Because if you just suspended him for the hit, that letter wouldn't have been that long. You would have just went directly to the second part of what you said. Like what, even though I don't agree with all of it, but you could have just went to that and said, this is the reason why we're suspending him a game. But you didn't. You went straight to the other stuff first, which tells me you suspended him really for that and not necessarily the hit, which is hypocritical.
Joel is on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Joel, thank you for waiting. Please go ahead.
Yes, I'm sick with all these quarterbacks running. They're not supposed to run. Look, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, who are the quarterbacks that love to run? Okay.
Lamar Jackson.
Lamar Jackson. Okay. Here is the problem. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, they run. They're about to go out, and then they run. They tiptoe, and then defender pull off. Now they're back in the field, and they won the game because of a field goal. He ran like a 31-yard line. So, quarterback not supposed to run. I think Rex Ryan said something. Instead of them sliding, how about them diving? Because the defender is coming. It's up in the air. And you sliding, your hit is up. And they coming. Now they already launched. Try to tackle you, and you're going to meet in the middle. So who do you blame there? When they already, in the air, maybe he used his elbow, something different, even though he did not. Some people, they try to dive and they injured themselves. I don't remember the guy try to avoid landing on a quarterback. Why are they treated special than other players? They all make money. They all special people. And we watch all of them. When I watch the game, I want to see the good game. And all these tag attack, this quarterback is not important than other quarterback. This team is punishing more. All officiating, the flag call, the game becomes, I used to be a big fan of NBA. I don't watch it anymore because of hand check. It's a physical game. Let them play. Treat them like other players. I'm so tired. This quarterback, at any moment they fake the ball should be there right there. Just like college.
Joel, thank you for the call. Thank you for the call. Ron on our text line has a similar point, Derek. Ron says about Shire, he was wrong for the hit, but some responsibility has to go on the quarterback. He has to know that trying to go for that one more yard can get you hurt. Defenders don't want you to have that one more yard. Quarterbacks need to know when they're running to get down as soon as a defender is about 5 yards from them. But going for that extra yard could get you hurt. Not defending the guy, just saying some responsibility should go on the quarterback. But look, the quarterbacks are going to be extra protected. I mean, we look at some of the roughing the passer calls in the NFL, and if you breathe on the quarterback wrong, there goes the flag.
Yeah.
So in that situation, I mean, it's a high-speed collision. I understand what Joel is saying. It comes down to split second, depending on when Shire launches himself, when Lawrence slides. It's just the timing of it. But quarterbacks, rightly or wrongly, are going to be extra protected by the NFL.
Yeah, they are, and I don't expect it to be changed. But listen, I think Show was right with one of his points, just like Rex Ryan was right when he said it too. And I heard a few players say it today. I think we put so much of the responsibility on the defensive player to avoid the offensive player that we put the defensive player at a disadvantage right away. There should be a rule that if you are going toward out of bounds and you look like you're going toward out of bounds and you're angling toward out of bounds and you decide to come back in, no, you're out of bounds. There's no trying to trick the defender, because that's what these quarterbacks are doing. And it's smart. You're working with the rules. It's like, okay, if I could get the minute I'm going out of bounds, typically what do guys do? They pull up. And then some quarterbacks try to get that extra yard or two. I saw on a game, I think it was this week or last week, a guy was running out of bounds. Quarterback was running out of bounds. The guy let up. It was clear that the quarterback was trying to run out of bounds. The guy let up. The quarterback turned it up and got an extra 2 yards and then ran out. I'm looking at the defensive player like, why didn't you tackle him? And then I had to rewind and was like, oh, that's why. Because he has to make a decision, a split second decision to decide whether I'm going to hit this quarterback or I'm going to let the quarterback run. And a lot of times they rather pull up and the quarterback gets an extra 2 yards than to try to take that hit, which would probably be a legal hit, but because he's so close out of bounds, depending on who the quarterback is, they're going to throw the flag. So I think they have to really look at these rules about the sliding and the going out of bounds when it comes to quarterback. There has to be a point where if you give the indication that you're going down, that's where we're marking you at. Because we don't want to get to a point where you start to fake like you're going down and then you keep running. That happened a few years ago where a guy acted as if he was sliding and the defensive guy pulled up and the guy just kept running. I think it happened in a college game a few years ago. And then we look at the defensive player like, why didn't you make the tackle? Well, because hell, if it looks like he's sliding, I'm up to make the tackle. I got to pull up because if I hit him, they're gonna throw a flag on me. It happened to Human Euro some years ago with Vince Young, when the whole thing with protecting the quarterback was really at his height. He had the quarterback wrapped up. He had Vince Young wrapped up and was expecting the ref to expecting the ref to blow the whistle because I got him. I don't want to slam him down. I don't want to do all this because they're going to call roughing the passer. What did he do? After about a couple of seconds, he let him go. And Vince ended up running for a touchdown. See, stuff like that. Like, you can't, they gotta find a way to be able to legislate these things without putting the defensive player at a disadvantage. That's all I'm saying. But I understand they got to protect their quarterbacks, and I'm all about protecting the player, but there has to be a point where we say, listen, quarterback, some of this onus has to go on you. You got to dive, like you either got to dive or you got to slide. And I'm with a lot of people now. Sliding may be more detrimental to you than diving forward. Because when you slide, you're giving up your head. You're giving up everything. Even if I hit you in the chest, your back of your head is still going to hit the canvas.
But if you're diving, you're leading with your head.
No. If I'm diving or if I'm diving forward, I'm not like diving in the air. I'm diving down, like down and out of the way. I'm not sliding because when I slide, I'm more likely, if I'm a defender, to hit you up high if I do hit you. Even if I don't mean to hit you high, I'm still going to hit you high. And you might end up having a concussion, not because I hit you, but because your head hit the canvas.
A couple of texters point out Kenny Pickett when he was at Pitt.
I think that was the play, yes.
Did a
Yes.
fake slide in the ACC championship game.
He ended up running for a touchdown.
I believe it was a 58-yard touchdown. So, according to a memo from NCAA National Coordinator of Officials Steve Shaw, referees should interpret a fake slide as a player surrendering himself.
And that's the way the NFL should look at it.
End the play. The person said, quote, anytime a ball carrier begins, simulates, or fakes a feet-first slide, the ball should be declared dead by the on-field officials at that point. The intent of the rule is player safety, and the objective is to give a ball carrier an option to end the play by sliding feet first, and to avoid contact. To allow the ball carrier to fake a slide would compromise the defense that is being instructed to let up when the ball carrier slides feet first.
Exactly. And I wonder if the NFL has such rule. If they do, they need to enforce it more on the out of bounds as well, not just the slide. If they do have that rule, they need to enforce it. If they don't have that rule, they need to implement it. Again, I'm not saying it's all the quarterback's fault because they have to protect the quarterback. That's what put butts in the stands. That's why sponsors come out and they sponsor your games. That's why ESPN, that's why the NFL has these huge contracts. Not because a receiver or a defensive player. It's all about the quarterbacks. That's why they put these rules in to protect them. Well, if that's the case, you got to understand, you got to let these quarterbacks know. If you simulate you're going out of bounds, if you're angling for that out of bounds and everybody in the building knows it, and then all of a sudden, because the defensive player lets up, you try to get an extra 2 yards. No. We're going to put you back right where you started to go out of bounds, or we're going to put you right where you started that fake slide.
615-737-1025. By the way, Alex from Franklin, and I think this is a good way to wrap this up. Alex from Franklin says, Adam and Derek, we can all agree that Rand Carthon's best move this season was letting Azeez Al-Shaair walk. Thank God this isn't the Titans issue. I can only imagine
oh my goodness,
where that would rank.
If this would have happened in the Titans uniform.
Yes.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, boy. Fortunately, we don't have to worry about that. 615-737-1025. We'll wrap up the show next. Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5-106.3. The Game. D-Mace, Vingan and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Derek Mason and Adam Vingan here with you. Stillman and Company coming up next. A reminder, Barry Trotz, Predators general manager, will join Jared for his normal Tuesday sit-down at 5 o'clock. The Predators are back in action tomorrow night on the road at the Toronto Maple Leafs. And although we did start the show with this, Derek, we did receive a couple of texts to this effect. For those of you that are interested in watching the Hallmark movie that I made Derek watch over the weekend, it's called Holiday Touchdown: A Chiefs Love Story. It's on the Hallmark Channel. So if you're interested in watching it, that's the name of the program. Holiday Touchdown: A Chiefs Love Story. So it's Tuesday, college football playoff rankings. That's become the norm around here on Tuesday. We talk about that. It's championship week in college football. And here's one thing that I really love about this 12-team playoff, Derek. As you know, I'm a big college basketball fan. And one of the best parts about the NCAA tournament in the lead up to the NCAA tournament, the March Madness tournament, is bid stealing. So we all think of, that plucky mid-major team. They're going to get their, they're expected.
Go Blue Raiders.
They're expected, like the Blue Raiders, they're expected, to win their conference tournament, get that automatic bid, but they lose. But they still have a good enough resume to get in. So another team wins the conference tournament, gets the automatic bid, and they steal a bid from another at-large team. That's my favorite part of championship week in college basketball. And I feel like we can get that here in college football. And I'm looking at one team in particular as the ultimate bid stealer, and that's Clemson. Clemson is in the ACC title game against SMU after Miami lost to Syracuse, which you predicted in Silly Underdog Picks. Yes. Congratulations. My favorite part about that game was, I believe it was Don Davenport was interviewing the Syracuse coach. And at the end of the interview, he said, "Dabo, much love. I got you in, baby."
He did Dabo a favor.
Yes. So the coach's name is escaping me, but I did think that was funny. He did shout out Dabo Sweeney for getting him into the ACC
is
title
Pat
game.
Narduzzi still? No, Pat's at
that's Pittsburgh,
Pitt.
right?
He's at Pitt.
So it's Clemson and SMU in the ACC title game. And I really do think it comes down to, look, if SMU beats Clemson, I think it's pretty simple. SMU gets in, they get the automatic bid by winning the ACC. Clemson at that point would be a 4-loss team. I think they're out. I think it's a win and in situation for Clemson. You win, you get the automatic bid. You lose, you're out because they would be a 4-loss team. So let's just say Clemson wins. They pull off the upset. SMU at this point is a 2.5-point favorite, so it wouldn't be a gigantic upset. But let's say Clemson pulls off the upset. I still think SMU gets in. Depending on the outcome of the game. If Clemson blows the doors off of SMU, maybe that changes things. But I think if Clemson wins and it's close, I think SMU gets in, which means somebody that might want to get into the college football playoff might not get in. And I think that team might be Alabama.
Well, Alabama's going to need, a lot to get in. Alabama's, to me, is not one of the top 12 teams this year. They're just not. As much as I, still have this, love affair with Alabama because of Nick Saban, even though he's not there, I just don't believe, after watching them all season, I just don't believe they're one of the top 12 teams in the country. Now, if Clemson ends up winning, they end up going in because they are the winner of the ACC, and they're it'd be 10-3.
They'll be 10-3 if they win.
SMU will be 9-2 or 9-3, 10-2.
Let's take a look. SMU, if they were to lose, they would be 11-2.
So you figure, even if SMU loses,
I think they're in.
They're more than
regardless of the outcome.
In. Clemson is the team that has to win.
They have to win.
So if Clemson doesn't win, who then sort of takes their spot? Because right now you figure you have 2 ACC teams in. If Clemson win, you got SMU and you got Clemson.
Does Miami find a way to get back in if Clemson wins? Well, sorry, if Clemson loses.
If Clemson loses,
yeah.
But who would they jump over to get in? That's the thing.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm looking at the projections here, the projected top 25 on The Athletic. They have Clemson at number 19 right now. And of course, the cutoff is 12. But that's a good question. I don't know. Like, part of me thinks that if Clemson win, I mean, it might be as simple if Clemson wins, SMU also gets in as well. I'm just wondering. I'm wondering what the first team out is going to be, and I still think it will be Alabama because they do have some marquee wins on their resume, despite being a 3-loss team.
But if you watch Alabama, it's from what I've seen.
And Alabama has played a much tougher schedule than SMU.
But Alabama isn't. Now, we are comparing Alabama to previous Alabama teams, and maybe that's not fair, but they just don't look like one of the top 10 or 12 teams in the country this year. They just don't. So do you put them in because of the mystique of Alabama? Is the residue of Nick Saban still so much there that even after 3 losses, you still put him in? I'm not sure. Milroe isn't playing well. Doesn't look good. His stock is going down. The defense hasn't looked, Alabama-ish. They just don't. They're not the same team. So if they do get in, I think it's just because of the residue of Nick Saban. It's still being there.
Right. They're a marquee franchise, so to speak. Yeah. Everybody knows the name Alabama. So they may get more benefit of the doubt because they're Alabama. Maybe if SMU does lose, although they'll be an 11-2 team versus an Alabama team, which is 9-3. Alabama did play a tougher schedule. They are Alabama. So maybe SMU does get.
What about South Carolina or
yeah, so that is
Ole
the
Miss
one.
or Ole Miss.
I think Ole Miss is out.
I think Ole Miss is out.
That loss against Kentucky.
That loss
That's
to Kentucky is bad.
But they did beat Georgia, who's playing for the.
But Georgia's. I get it, but that loss to Kentucky.
Agree.
It's still a bad loss. That was the one they had to have. That
loss to Florida was really bad too.
Yeah, you're right. But Florida ends up being a good team.
Yeah.
So it's not as bad. But Kentucky, that was bad. You should beat Kentucky. I'm looking at it like, okay, Penn State, that's the team. Do Penn State have to win the Big Ten title to get into the playoffs? Could they lose considering what their schedule has been? And they haven't beat a top 25 team. And if they lose to Oregon, they will be undefeated, meaning they will be winless against top 25 teams or top 20 teams. Do you still put them in?
I mean, I think I feel like they're safe. I do feel like they're safe.
Because it's like we got to put 4 teams in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
From the Big Ten, and you got to get 4 teams from the SEC.
Maybe. Yeah. Look, it's tough. And I'm glad we're getting to championship week at this point. Because as Willie likes to talk about, until we play those championship games, we don't really know how all of this is going to shake out. And we'll finally have our answers after this weekend.
But the one team I think that is like, whew, thank goodness, it's Indiana.
Yes.
Indiana's like, thank goodness we don't have to play in the Big Ten championship game. Because if they get blown out by Oregon, they're not making it. With 2 losses, they're not making it.
Yeah. So this is what Lane Kiffin was talking about with the SEC, except he didn't get a chance to make it to the SEC title game because he lost to Florida. Exactly. But I do want to touch on one thing quickly. I mean, I'm not looking forward to Chris Sanders gloating on Thursday, but he did pick Michigan to upset Ohio State. And I've seen that. I believe even our dear friend Caroline Fenton said that if Ryan Day is going to keep his job at Ohio State, he has to win the national title. Do you think it's that cut and dry that the only way Ryan Day will survive after losing again to Michigan is if he rebounds by winning the national title?
I tell you what he can't do is lose in the first round. That's what he can't do. Now, anything beyond that, I think if he gets to the title game, I think they keep him. Unless the noise starts to get so loud, and we all know the name that will come up, Mike Vrabel. Unless the noise starts to get that loud in Columbus that they just feel they got to make a change, I don't think they make the change unless he loses in the first round. If he gets past the first round, I think, okay, all bets are off. I think his seat is safe. But if he loses in the first round, I think they're going to be looking to go another direction.
So based on the projections by Heather Dinich at ESPN.com, Ohio State is 8th. They would host Tennessee. They would host Tennessee in the first round in Columbus, and the winner of that game would play Oregon. And Oregon and Ohio State played a good game earlier this season.
Well, unless UT gets healthy very quickly, that's not going to be a good game for them, because they are a beat up team, especially at the wide receiver position.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Look, I turned on the game a little bit late on Saturday, and when I saw it was 14-0 Vanderbilt, I had to do that thing where I rubbed my eyes extra hard to make sure. And look, I don't have the greatest vision, but I had to rub my eyes extra hard to make sure I was seeing what was actually happening. I know that Tennessee bounced back, but we talked about it. Like Robbie Stanley, our resident Vols fan, he was nervous about it. I know a lot of Vols fans were nervous about that game. It certainly didn't start off the way they intended, but they did get the win. They did put themselves in position, to make the college football playoff. But Vanderbilt did give him a scare early on.
You had to text Willie.
Yeah, you had to do it.
I said, I texted Coach Willie and made sure I had a little anchor emoji in there as well. Now, Willie did not respond because we know Coach Willie. He's got tunnel vision. And look, I get it. Like, I'm one of those sports fans too, that even when things are going well, I'm like, what's going to go wrong?
Waiting for the shoe to drop.
What's going to go wrong? What's going to go wrong? So, but hopefully Willie doesn't blame
you
that
do that to
on me.
Duke Blue Devils?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
You have no faith in your
No,
team?
I do, but as I'm one of one of those cynical sports fans where I'm just like, everything's going to get worse before it gets better. And by the way, ACC SEC Challenge in college basketball these next 2 days, some good games. Duke and Auburn tomorrow. Looking forward to that one. But that'll do it for us today. An eventful day on our program, even though we were down a man. We'll be back tomorrow. Willie will join us for at least a portion of the show tomorrow, live from Toronto, where the Predators will face the Toronto Maple Leafs. A reminder, Barry Trotz with Jared Stillman at 5 o'clock, and Stillman & Company is coming up next on 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Be love on your people. Have a wonderful